is a meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Soil Board. Is there a motion to call the joint meeting from the Board of Selectmen with the Soil Board to order?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Is there a motion to call the Soil Board meeting, joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen to order?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is there a motion to open the continuance of the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, Mr. Hinckley?
Yes.
Mr. Warner?
Yes.
And I am a yes. All motions made between now and the end of this meeting will be joint motions. I mean, Jeff?
Yeah.
What am I trying to say? All motions are made?
Would be joint motions of the Board of Selectmen and the Soil Board.
Soil Board, thank you. All right, see, tonight we have peer review, our town's engineers that are here tonight to make a presentation. First, they will do an opening of an introduction of themselves and what they do. PJ Keating's here with their attorney, Mr. Luke Legier, Mr. Derek Hill, I see here, and I believe that's Drew from TRC, is that correct? Mr. Vigno, Mr. Robinson from PJ Keating, welcome. Kyle?
Sure.
If you want to,
Are they going to be using that?
yep, in a little bit. You want to,
Oh, yeah. You guys see?
What's that?
yeah, if you want to go to the podium over there, and or do you,
Be able to control this.
I can problem too.
Yeah, I can do that.
Let's get this one.
yeah. See how I think we got to figure it out.
All right, thanks for having us. Kyle Maxfield and my colleague David Bonnet from Geosyntec, representing the town as a third-party review on PJ Keating's earth removal permit application. So real quick, we'll just give you an outline of what the purpose was here, our introduction, quick site description, our agreed-on scope of work between PJ Keating and the town, and what was expected of us. As part of that, we'll start, the intent of this meeting will be to kind of give an overview of the requested variances from PJ Keating in their soil removal application, and we'll go over some summaries and conclusions. So I imagine if you're here, you probably are familiar with the site. This is a quick aerial view of the facility. The left side of this picture is South Main Street where the main entrance is. The active quarry is set a little bit further back. The Pembroke Avenue neighborhood up at the top of the photo, and then Lawson Avenue neighborhood down near the bottom. Oh, yep. So here's the scope of work. As I said, this was from our proposal that was agreed upon with PJ Keating and the town. So we performed the site visit on July 20th, myself and another colleague, to take a look at the site, see the anticipated operations. Went from there, we started reviewing. What we did was took an overall view of the expected anticipated regulations and standards that a mining operation would need to follow, right from the town, state, and federal level. So those three levels we're in the process of breaking it all out, creating a punch list checklist of everything that they should be required to submit and follow. We're in the process of preparing a memorandum summarizing all of those. And just give a few examples of what those details are: mining, air emissions, noise, and then stormwater and levels. So as I said, for each one of those, there's three levels. You have the federal level, state level, and town level. So we're working on reviewing and creating a list for all of those. And then once we were able to parse out all that, we're going through a detailed review of their permit application. So our initial review, they presented their application. Up front, they issued a request for variances of the town bylaw. So in general, we have summarized tonight to talk about, we've summarized 18. We've narrowed that down to a few more after discussions with PJ Keating. We'll try to review everything we can with the time that we have today. Knowing that we'll have some back and forth and discussions between the town, PJ Keating, and of course the public. So those will be the 6 main variances tonight. However, all of these will be submitted in our memorandum and thoroughly described with provided recommendations from us. So, comment number one, this is kind of number one and number two, was that application filing fee. PJ Keene's first variance was that there's no listed filing fee for the permit application. So we just quoted the town bylaw. Our understanding is, based on the town bylaw, they have the right to establish a fee that they feel is appropriate for the application. So we're not here to give a number, tell what the number is. We can have those discussions based on our past experience or experiences within the town. But that's the first one. Number two is the required bond. I think that has been agreed upon with PJ Keene, so we can skip to the next comment, which is number three. So it gets right into the weight limits of vehicles and traffic on town. A lot of text in there from the town bylaw, so I'm not going to read it, but I did highlight a few of the bulk of the concern that the town and the public have. And you can see it's injuries and dangers to the public health or safety through the traffic and weight of vehicles going through town, traffic congestion that create the hazards in the town, transportation that would cause undue injury to the roadway surfaces, so excess vehicles, size of vehicles throughout the town requiring repairs to the roadways. And then it will have any sort of material adverse effects on health and safety of persons in the neighborhood, so Pembroke Avenue and Boston Avenue neighborhoods. We can discuss more of that. And then I know one of the sticking points is the town bylaw references the federal truck weight limits of 80,000 pounds. Now I think is the sticking point between PJ Keene and the town. Right now the town bylaw has 80,000 pounds. PJ Keene is looking for the state approved limit, which is 99,000 pounds. So that's what we're here to discuss.
So we're going to jump to comment 9. We'll cover, if we have time.
Yes, yeah. So you'll see that the numbers kind of jump around. We're going to address the ones that PJ Keene requested us to focus on tonight. So that's why you won't see them go in numerical order. If we got time to get into the other ones. So number 9 is the authority of the board. PJ Keene was concerned that allowing one individual to have the authority to shut down the site did not seem reasonable. Our opinion and recommendation is that this would be very similar to, say, a conservation commission or a board of health, where each of those have an agent that represents them. They don't make ultimate decisions, but they do report back to their appropriate board. So there's no real reason not to have that individual in place that would have the ability and authority to visit the site when they deem appropriate or necessary to ensure that the operation is following the permit that they hopefully will receive in the future. And one of the other, so over comment number 11, groundwater. We know PJ Keene has informed us that the bedrock area there is a very tight unit of bedrock, very little seepage coming through their open rock faces. So that's what they know where they are now. We understand that the quarry is to be expanded in the future as they look to perform work heading out into the site. So we do recommend, based on the bylaw, that PJ Keene is aware of the groundwater elevation at the site as they expand their operation. So this would be installing some sort of a monitoring well where they can monitor and observe the groundwater table. The bylaw does say that material should be removed within 4 feet of the spring high water table. Again, that it can be open for discussion based on their particular operation, but we do feel that they should be aware of what the groundwater is on the site. And I'm sure, because they're going through the tribe, and this is our last one of the 6 is traffic within the neighborhoods. So again, a lot of text here. The main takeaway from the town bylaw is the last sentence about the project, or if the soil removal activities will adversely impact the public and or be contrary to the interests of the town. So this is something we expect some back and forth with some discussion on what the interests of the town are as far as safety, traffic, congestion, roadway impact. So yeah, bring this one to the attention. We expect to have some conversation tonight on what we feel and what PJ Keene is asking for variances. So yeah, I think that was the last one of the 6, right? So Kevin, it's up to you. We can go through the rest of them, or we can focus on these 6 now, could open it up to discussion.
You can go through the other ones if you like.
Okay.
I think it'd be good for the audience to know that we've reviewed some of the questions that were presented to us on the
Yep.
first page of the application.
All right, absolutely. Okay, so comment number 17 is the hours of operation of the facility. Their permit application is right now had 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., so 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Seem to be a little off base of their other facilities in the state and other facilities that we're aware of in the state. Don't tend to be open that late. So if they're looking for a variance to stay open later, we need to see some proof of, to have a discussion of why they deem it necessary to stay, or have longer hours than typical operating procedures. So we'll come back to this. This is what we, so these are the, I guess, approved / agreed upon variances from our original 18 list. We'll go through each of these individually. This is just a quick list, and I see that the comments that we're missing, we'll kind of go through here. So Dave's going to go to the next one. We discussed the bond. PJ we agreed to the bond based on the correspondence that we received, so we can skip through that. One of the comments that PJ Keating had on the town bylaw was the required 2-to-1 sloping of any open excavation. We agree. The intent of the bylaw is for earthwork and soil excavations for the 2-to-1 slope for stable slopes. PJ Keating's dealing with open rock face where the 2-to-1 slope is not viable for them to perform their work. And also, we all know that rock face is stable at a vertical, so we do agree. So comments 4, 7, and 8 are all relative to opening their excavation at a more vertical slope than 2-to-1. And comment number 6 was the permit renewal. PJ Keating had concern that they would have to apply for this soil removal permit on an annual basis, which it's an extensive permit application, so for them would be a lot of effort and work where they'd basically be continually working on a permit as the year passed by, getting ready for the following year. That was not our interpretation of the bylaw. It's a renewal of the bylaw where our understanding they could come in front of the board and give an update, give an annual report on how things have gone, how much soil or how much rock has been excavated, just an update on current work at the facility over the past year, and then the board could approve to renew that permit for another year. Significantly less effort than having to compile the full application, so we do feel that this is a worthwhile exercise for Keating. That way the town is aware of what's ongoing at the facility. Same thing with the SWIP and erosion control. It's tough to read the scan that came through, but it's kind of an outline of how the water on site is conveyed across the site and then ultimately gets taken off site. But the main idea here is that any open excavation areas, whether it's earth or rock, mainly earth, they're going to have other excavation on the site or stockpiles of material. If those materials are left, our recommendation is if materials like that are left longer than 90 days or up to 90 days, where they're not being used, moved, that they be stabilized. We don't want to see stockpiles of either silt, sand, or other materials that are just put off to the side, open to the elements, weather, and potential for runoff or off-site or into resource areas we'll discuss later. And then so reclamation of the property. This is probably one we don't need to talk about too much tonight. Reclamation of the property was very far down the road. But the bylaw does have some language, no stockpiles of material fill, any sort of waste will be left on the property at the completion of the project. We feel that's applicable to a quarry. And those conversations of how to use that material, where it'll go, what the facility would look like when the town receives the property back upon completion of the quarry activities is open for discussion. But yeah, something over the next 15, 20 years will be rehashed as far as like the town's 10-year program, what they expect to see within the town. And that's the same thing with the backfilling. The bylaw indicated that once the contractors open up 600 feet, they need to start backfilling before they advance any further. We understand, similar to early on excavation of a rock quarry, you're gonna have much more than 600 feet open, you're gonna have a stable rock face. So this would be a variance that we recommend the town approve. And then as we're getting into the application permit a little bit more, we had some other outstanding comments. So we'll talk about those real quick. They're not from the variances requested by PJ Keating, but items that have come up as we've performed our review. So the first one is facility operations. The facility has not been operated for the past couple of years, as I understand. There's concern that things will change as PJ Keating restarts their operation, whether it's the location of the quarry, where they're quarrying rock, where they're processing the material, how the other facilities, the concrete, asphalt, are operated. Our recommendation is that portion, or at least that portion of the application, be updated once PJ Keating has decided their path forward with how their operations will proceed. Comment number 15 was based on the blasting schedule. I know there's some conflicting ideas on what their availability for blasting is right now, whether it's every day of the week or only 2 to 3 days a week. That's something we feel needs to be discussed so that the town and the public, especially the local neighborhoods, are aware of when PJ Keating has the ability to perform that blasting. This is something that should be brought in with fire department, board of health, so all parties are aware and have their input. And then I think our last one here is we were made aware of a slope failure on one of the stockpiles in the back of the site, an old silt pile that most of the banks are somewhat stable or have growth on them. This particular area did not, and it's sloughed down. So you can hit the button advance it one more time. One more. Yeah, and so materials went down this slope and off-site into a resource area. Our understanding is that has not been remedied yet. Our recommendation is that PJ Keating be allowed and should also get in there as soon as possible. Per the Conservation Commission's recommendations, remove any material, turn it back to its natural state. Our understanding is that they do intend to pull the slope of that, or the toe of that slope, and ultimately the top of that slope back to remove it from their 50-foot notice serve that the Conservation Commission has in their bylaws. We see no reason on either end, from them or from the town, why this shouldn't be performed, whether the quarry is operating on a daily basis or not. So I think with that, we can open it up to questions. We'll pull up an overview of the site, kind of showing, the Interstate I-95 down to the south of this picture, the neighborhoods again on there, and just the river, kind of giving you an overview of the town. And that sort of stuff.
Sorry, I was sitting on top of you.
Does anybody from PJ Keating want to have comments on what was just spoken about before I go to the public? I'd like to give PJ Keating an opportunity for anything that was said by our peer review engineers to either agree, disagree on any other comments and things that we just went through, so that we can kind of check off the boxes and say, okay, we agree on this thing, but this we don't agree on. Whatever we don't agree on, obviously, well, we have the peer review engineers in the room and your engineers in the room. If we can't get a final resolution within a couple of minutes of that, and the disagreement stays in place, we'll hold it until the next public hearing. We'll take those issues back up. Obviously, there's some things in here that we won't be able to address. It's just based on things that peer review saying, if there's a disagreement from PJ Keating's side, please do it now, so that the town understands where the disagreements lie, maybe what we agree on, check the boxes off, and we can push that off to the side and be done with it. So that we're not revisiting something 3 meetings down the road or 2 meetings down the road. Whatever we discussed tonight, I'd like to be able to hash all of that out, try to get some agreement on everything that's been said, or disagreement, and then hash it out while the engineers are in the room. And if we can't, again, we'll hold them, we'll bring them back for the next meeting. But I like to just try to move things along instead of sitting there going, well, 2 meetings from now, we're gonna go back to number 1 because we didn't hash that out. So that's pretty much how I would like to see the process go. So, Mr. Legier, the floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gaspar, members of the board, Luke Leger, McGregor, Leger, and Stevens on behalf of PJ Heating Company. Just very briefly, one point I'd like to make sort of right off the bat is it was not clear to us when we received the table from Geosyntec that there was more coming. So that's sort of news to us here recently, that there's going to be more coming from Geosyntec. This is kind of just an initial response. We do think that materially affects where we are in the process generally. I had sent back to town council what we were calling sort of a streamlined list based on the table that Geosyntec had produced. We took a look at that as a team. There were about a half dozen issues that really sort of jumped out at us. And yeah, these are things we need to talk about for exactly the reasons you just laid out, Mr. Gaspar. I just want to be really clear, I guess, in this initial comment that where there's more coming from Geosyntec, it strikes us that it may well be possible that some of the issues on that table that we thought were addressed and sort of put to bed or more or less non-issues may theoretically become issues. So I'm not trying to hide the ball or, put you in a position where we're going to try to spring something on you, as you said, a hearing or two down the line. I just want to be clear and upfront and make sure we're all on the same page that it might be that some of the issues that weren't included in that streamlined list, we do need to talk about a little more. And I think that, just to put a finer point on it, some of the issues that we did not include are certainly things that are going to need to be discussed, right? So, for example, Geosyntec mentioned the idea of a permit renewal process. Sort of in lieu of a formal full application annually, Heating would be submitting some report annually, sort of summarizing how things went the past year, letting the board know what Heating envisioned or anticipated for the coming year, rather than being in a perpetual state of applying and going through hearings. The devil's going to be in the details on that, right? So we didn't include that on our list because we agree in theory with what Geosyntec is putting forth, but it's going to be something that needs to be discussed, I guess, is something.
I have no idea what you just said.
Okay.
No clue.
Let me try again.
I really don't understand what you just went on for 5 minutes, so I have no idea.
Sure, let me try again. We provided the board with a list of 6 issues based on the table that Geosyntec had produced. Did you see that list, Mr. Walker? Okay. So that list was really intended to help try to focus the discussion here tonight, because those were what we saw as sort of the big issues that we thought really needed to be discussed and hashed out a little bit. I just want to be clear with the board that based on the understanding now that there's more coming from Geosyntec, those 6 issues aren't necessarily an exhaustive list of what we think needs to be discussed. Those are sort of the big ones. Those are the ones that jumped out at us as, yeah, we absolutely need to talk about.
But I don't understand, what's the issue?
I guess
Like, I don't understand why it's giving you heartburn. I don't, it's a process, right? I don't understand why you're worked up about it.
I apologize if I appear worked up. I don't have heartburn. I was really more just reacting to what Mr. Gaspar was saying. I agree with him. I understand what he was saying, that the board wants to sort of start checking things off the list. Heating wants that too. I just want to make sure we're all clear that this list of a half dozen issues are the big ones that we think need to be discussed. It's not necessarily the only ones that we think need to be discussed. It doesn't necessarily mean we're all on the same page with everything else that was included in the table. That's all. No heartburn, no stress.
Let me take a shot at it. So it's all about the renewal of the permit, right, on a yearly basis, right? That's what your discussion's based around.
Well,
right?
that's one example of something that's not on this list.
But that was the conversation you got to the podium, and this is where he was a little confused. And I think what you're trying to get to, and I think what Geosyntec is gotten to is, we have that agreement, and I think it's in the bylaw that the only way that you would have to reapply in a full application is if we ended up revoking the license due to non-compliance with X, Y, and Z. Is that correct, Jeff?
I think that's the way I read it.
So in the bylaw, it outlines inside the bylaw what would take place in order for it to have to go through the whole process, i.e. every year we've been renewing the permit, right? without a full application until we've had all the problems that we've had. So now here we lie with peer review. So now we're getting a template in place from peer review that hopefully peer review is gonna give it to us. The town and PJ Keating gonna try to work out agreements to everything that's put in place so that you're not going through this and we're not going through this as a town ever again. That's my goal, right, as the chairman of this board. And I think from the town's perspective, we get a template in place and say, this is what needs to be done at the facility. The town understands exactly what needs to be done at the facility. PJ Keating understands what they need to be doing to operate their facility, be good corporate stewards. The town's gonna look at it and say, you know what? This is everything that we agreed to. They're in compliance with it. We're not revoking it unless you have a violation. Then we give you, I think there's one warning that we give you. Then there's a second warning that we give you. And I think on the third strike, we can actually revoke the permit, which would then trigger a whole new application, right? I believe that's how it is.
I think that's fairly right.
So with that being said, as long as, in my view, and I think it's in your view and PJ Keating's management's view, is as long as we're here trying to operate and be good stewards and we all understand the rules, right, to the game, and we're not in violation of anything and we're not being foolish going, oh, wait, there's a speck of dust out of the place over there, we're shutting you down. I get your point, and I've been through it all with your folks on that. We're not, you just come in, and I think it's up to us, and that's why we're gonna have a soil permit fee, and we got it inside of our soil budget for engineering, because instead of having somebody that's in the town that's dealing with that stuff, I think we're gonna have an engineering firm, right, be able to do these kind of things, the in-place surveys we talked about, to know that how many cubic yards you're taking out of the ground to be in compliance with your soil removal permit. And as long as we get a good report, you know, we're gonna probably do it 2 or 3 times a year, the in-place surveys, we get a good report from that engineering firm, the consultant firm, whatever you wanna call it, we use. You come in for your renewal, and as long as there's a good report from that consultant or that engineer, and there's no horrific violations, everything's good. I think if there was a horrific violation, in the bylaw it says we need to notify you of that violation, it needs to be rectified within so much time frame, right? So I think there's a mechanism in the bylaw for us to be able to have a working relationship. We know nobody's perfect, there's gonna be mishaps, right? And you might get a letter, but that doesn't mean, oh my God, we got a letter, now it's a whole new application. So I think,
I'll say it. I mean, look, here's the deal. I don't know if it's your tactics or strategy, but I feel like every time you're before us, it's in a negative tone and some type of complaint. So when you start talking about, I want to make it clear, I want to make it clear. I get it. This, what they're presenting here, this is low-hanging fruit, okay? Some of the stuff is low-hanging fruit. So that's what I'm talking about. I mean, I like to get this off on a positive note, but when you come up here and you start kind of like talking down to us, saying, I want to make this perfectly clear, and we didn't get this, and so on and so forth, that's offensive to me, okay? And so I'm really clear about, I want to make it really clear on my end, okay? I've gone out of my way. We brought in Mr. Hill when I was the chairman to get this thing off on the right foot. So if this is a strategy or a tactic about like constantly complaining about you're not satisfied with the process, or this isn't working, whatever, I'm just asking, put that aside, because we want to get to results here. I don't want to get back and forth with this. We're not happy about this. We're not happy about that. This process isn't working for us, okay? So I get it. So let's just get this moving in the right direction. We don't need to have this, you know, I just want to make it perfectly clear business. That's all I'm going to say. I'm done with this conversation.
If I may, I apologize if I was speaking down to the board or appeared to. That certainly was not my intention. I wasn't trying to really do anything other than just help the board understand where we were coming from and just illustrate for you, again, sorry.
Could have said that. You don't have to come across like, I just want to make it clear. I want to make it clear. I want to make it clear. We get it. Okay? We get it.
So, responding to your comments, Mr. Gaspar, I think we agree with everything you were saying. And the point I was making was just, as when I said the devil's in the details, it kind of goes back to what you were saying. We want to make sure we're all understanding the ground rules, the rules of the game. That's exactly what I was talking about. That's what we want to. We want to make sure we understand the ground rules and the rules of the game, so we're all playing by the same rules moving forward. That's all. So that was just an example of something that,
I'm pretty sure, based on my conversations with Geosyntec and their engineers and our staff, is at the end of the day, you know, we'll have a little written booklet, right? And that's gonna be, you know, the Bible towards how everybody's gonna adhere to all the same rules, right? And we're not gonna be nitpicking every little thing that's going on at PJ Keating. I don't believe for a minute we, the town, belong trying to tell, you know, you folks how to run your business. The only time that we have the right to do that is when you start impacting the public's health, right? And well-being of our community, and that has occurred. And that's why we're here today, because things got a little too carried away, right? And that's why we're here today, Mr. Legier. And I hope that when we're done with this process, everything's gonna be clear to everyone, and Mr. Hill, as the new president's gonna understand to his team and make it clear to his team, it's unacceptable how the quarry was operating in the last several years, and things are gonna change. He's made that pledge to us. I hope that he keeps that pledge, and all the team at PJ Keating keeps that pledge. Everyone on that site understands what's happening, right? It's in state and fed, and he's gonna get, Geosyntec will get into the state and federal regulations that you need to abide by. I've read through them. It's pretty simple, right? The guidelines and the regulations of what you need to do for your air quality, right? The Clean Air Act and everything else, it's all right there. Basically what we're trying to emphasize to you that you need to comply with, that's all we're asking you to do, is be good stewards and comply with all the state, federal, and local regs. That's all we want. And, like I told you earlier on, several years back when we were in that Ford Middle School, you absolutely have the right to do business there, right? But what you don't have the right to do is pollute beyond your borders. And that's exactly what you've done to trigger this. So all we're doing is trying to figure out a way to not let that happen again, but to allow you folks to be able to operate your business the way you deserve to operate your business, as long as you're not impacting the public health in a negative way. That's all. I think that's what we're all here to do, right? I don't think that you sitting there would expect a company on the side of your house to be polluting in your property, would you? Would your kids running around the yard, right? You wouldn't think too kindly of that, would you? Would you?
would I think too kindly of a company polluting on my property?
Thank you. So that's all we're trying to figure out, is how not to have that happen. And I think, you know, we'll get to that point, right? So there's things that we're gonna discuss. You may not be happy, your team might not be happy, the company may not be happy. There's things that we might end up doing that we're not gonna be happy with either, but we know we gotta give, right? And that's what this is a give and take. So, you know, that's what we're trying to do, is navigate where those two streets meet. That's what we're trying to do, quite simply.
Okay. Derek, did you want to?
I just wanted to make a comment. Derek Hill, president of PJ Keating. Relative to the example for renewal, I see a lack of clarity in there as to what we're supposed to submit. So with the peer consultant, I think it's very important that we have a template of, here is the expectation. We're going to come in and we're going to discuss tons removed. We're going to discuss any notices of noise or dust or complaints of that sort. Whatever it might be, it needs to be very clear as we get ready to agree on a permit, because right now, this statement as written is somewhat obtuse, and obtuse doesn't work for us, and it doesn't work for the town. So I think in fairness, as we think about process, we need to be able to have a very clean template of what are the things that we're going to come before the town on an annual basis. And that's not clear in the application, and we clearly couldn't comment on it in our application, right? So, just as an
Okay,
example.
Mr. Bonnet, you have?
Yeah, so what we would be suggesting, there's a discussion that needs to go on, would be to create a form, and that would be very clear, and we break it down into the regulations and have a checkbox, yes or no. And in addition to that, we would want the town to know, hey, we in addition to the, call it an annual report, right? It's a very concise, all the numbers that jump out of the page. But we'd also include something like, we want to make changes to our operations. And you would insert, hey, this is, we have a conveyor belt, it's breaking down all the time, we're gonna replace it, and this is our solution. So it informs the town of your plans in advance so that that can be taken into consideration with the full application.
No, I think that's great. I mean, but as written in the earth removal bylaw, it is obtuse. So I don't think either parties would be comfortable as written. We're certainly not.
Mr. Blake.
The town council is very comfortable with it written. I think that provision in that bylaw is very clear. Approval of the renewal of a permit for a period not to exceed 1 year may be made by the Board of Selectmen, that has changed, it'll be the soil board, without a hearing if the board, after a report from the inspector, finds that all conditions of the bylaw and the permit then applicable have been complied with. That's as clear as, I think it's crystal clear.
So I guess-
But I do believe is that there will be some more clarity in the permit, and I think there's another opportunity through another agreement that we've discussed where we can get even more clarity. But I disagree that that's obtuse. I disagree that any court would find that obtuse. But it's probably not worth us sitting here arguing about it, because I think both parties will get to a point where we'll make it clearer for you.
And that's really all we're saying. And that, just to be perfectly, sorry, we use the word, but clear, that's really what I meant up front. Just the devil's gonna be in the details on these things. So I understand, what town council just read does sound pretty straightforward. It's also a report from the inspector. And what I understood us to be talking about here tonight was more of a report from PJ Keating. So that's exactly the sort of thing we're talking about. We just need to make sure we're all on the same page, singing from the same sheet, and make sure that we all understand.
I don't think the town's gonna let PJ Keating self-police themselves anymore, right? That's the whole thing. That's why the bylaw is written where you have an inspector, or we'll probably do it through a name, an inspector as a consultant, outside person to deal with these kind of things and give us a report, right? And it is pretty clear under Section 9 violations, if the enforcement officer or board concludes that there has been a violation of this bylaw, he or she shall hand deliver or send to the person in charge of permit holder by certified mail, return receipt requested to the address stated in the initial application or any other manner provided by law, a notice ordering a cessation of the improper activities. If a permit holder or other offender persists in such violation, the enforcement officer or board may seek the imposition of penalties authorized by paragraph 17, section 21D of chapter 40 GL through the appropriate legal action, and the penalty removing earth in violation of this bylaw shall be a fine of not more than $200 for the first offense, no more than $300 for the second offense, no more than $300 for any subsequent offense. If the offender persists with the violation, a permit issued under the bylaw may be revoked by the board after notice and hearing. So there is a process there, obviously, is what I talked about before, right? We tell you there's a problem, 2 days, 5 days later, whatever it is, if it's dust going into a neighborhood, whatever the problem is, it hasn't been corrected, we give you another one, you're still just saying, we don't care, we ain't taking care of it, we're gonna keep operating the plant the way we are, and then bing, your license is gonna be revoked because you're just not listening, right? And I think that the company, I think, gets that now, where, it's just, you ain't just gonna do it under Mr. Hill. I would give him the benefit of the doubt right now, because he hasn't proved us wrong, although the plant's not operating. But I take the man for his word, right? He said a lot of things that were appealing to me, and I think to the board. So, actions speak louder than words. So that's what we're all about right now, is figuring that out. But this process is here, and I just hope that everybody follows the process.
Sure, and I would just add to that, I think while we're on this topic, really what we heard from Geosyntec in terms of their suggestion that any sort of enforcement process follow more closely what one would see with a Conservation Commission or a Board of Health, that's fine with PJQ. I mean, that's essentially what we had in mind as well. In other words, as currently enforced, inspector, I apologize if I'm getting that title wrong, but can unilaterally issue an enforcement order. There is no opportunity for hearing before a board. There's currently a case pending challenging this board's cease and desist orders that we never got a chance to come before the board. So I think that's a nice example of the type of thing that, yeah, you know, I don't really believe we're far apart at all. It's just wanting to really make crystal clear, maybe it's in the four corners of the permit itself, here's the process. Where the bylaw maybe doesn't always nail those things.
Sure. I agree.
So I'll, however the board, I guess, wants to
Mr.
proceed
Chairman,
to-
if I may, and just to clarify, I think this is where this all kind of went off right away. Just because Geosyntic provided us with a streamlined focal point here, that doesn't mean we don't want to discuss the other items that you have concerns with. Whether next meeting or the following meeting after that. So our plan is to address every possible question that both parties have, so we can come to a good resolution and make sure this works out for everybody involved.
Okay, understood, and just, you know, really where I was coming from off the top was just to try to let the board understand that on the heating side, we didn't realize there was more coming. It was as simple as that. I wasn't trying to denigrate the process or anybody on the board or Geosyntek or anybody else. We got that report a few weeks ago. We had the impression that that was it. That's all I was saying.
But if you look at that punch list, it basically, it covers some things in the application, but it's more to your cover letter to the application, right?
Understood.
You had a lot of concerns of certain things, and that's why we want to put it all on the table and just address those concerns. Some of them were valid concerns that you had addressed inside that letter, and I felt it was appropriate we at least discuss those things, right? And when we understand now with Kyle and myself and the team, Mr. Blake and Mr. Kelly, when we were doing this, we understand a little bit better of why, you know, the confusion was there, like the slope thing and everything else. It makes sense. Waiver's gonna need to be required. That's obviously why this board acted and amended that soil conservation bylaw for a waiver provision, because without it, we couldn't do anything for you, right? So, you know, we're working to get someplace. We just want the same thing in return, right? We don't always want to be faced with resistance, and I think that's what Selectmen was saying is, you know, as we're trying to do certain things, we would probably appreciate it if that was recognized, the work that we are doing to try to get us to the goal line. And I understand it's been a long, crappy process for PJ Keating, but it's been a long, crappy process for us as well, right? And we're learning as we go through the process, and that's why we're determined that we're just gonna get it, we're gonna do this, we're gonna get it right. There's not gonna be any kind of Mickey Mouse, so you guys aren't operating a business and 6 months later, God forbid something happened to one of us and there's a new composition of the board, all three of us, and there's a new composition of the board, and somebody else comes in and goes, well, no, that's not in here, so now, you know what, we're gonna revoke that license, and you guys are gonna be sitting there going, really? That's the whole point of working with Geosyntek and getting that document, a template in place, so everybody knows the game, the rules of the game, right? And there's no change in the rules of the game in the third inning. We're finishing the game. And I think
Or when
that's,
the coach changes, or yeah.
I think it's the fair thing for the town to have that document in place so everybody knows what the operating procedure is going to be moving forward with this company. And I think it's only fair to the company to have that book in place to say we know what the protocol is going to be to operate our business and stay in business without any kind of crap going on with the town again and being shut down, right?
We're saying the same thing.
So that's hopefully where we're gonna end up at the end of all of this. Can I ask a question before I turn it over to the audience? There is something inside of here that we didn't touch on, but you mentioned truck trips a day. And in your application, it mentions, you know, in the 2016-18 era or whatever, for aggregates, you did 500 and something truck trips a day, right? And then your aggregates for your asphalt plant, you did 400 and something, and you're requesting hours of operation of like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then you're talking 975 truck trips a day. How was that number ever derived to?
I'm going to, I think there are two issues really around the truck, right? There's the weight and then the trips, essentially. I'm going to defer that to Derek. I don't know if you or Rob would be the best to speak to those truck issues.
So the only reason why is, I mean, simple math. So I just went on 15 hours, y'all proposed hours of operation, 15 hours roughly, right? And then you got 965, okay? So you're talking a truck every minute, 60 trucks an hour is what it comes out, and you get to 900 truck trips a day. How?
Shut down South Main, shut down for them, right? Shut down.
So let's the conversation go, and then I'm gonna take from the public later on to have any discussion on what we've discussed. Thank you.
Okay, well, Derek Hill, PJ Keating's president. So a couple things. First of all, we need to clarify the hours of operation, which are listed in there, doesn't also mean that those are all the hours of operation for the scale house for the aggregate processing facility. But we're asked for hours of operation in a crusher, an asphalt plant, any of those. We have maintenance teams that come in, so there's your processing hours, there's your sales hours, but then there are ancillary support activities associated with the facility. So hours of operations that we had there were really based on those pieces that we could have a maintenance team after the scale close work on the plant. So that's included in hours of operation. Truck trips are in and out, right, Doug? That's how we did it. Doug and I broke it down, looked at the volumes, looked at the trucks, looked at what trucks we have. You know, and this goes back to the weight restriction. And I just asked all of us to understand where weight restrictions come from, right? Weight restrictions on vehicles start at the federal level, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, and it's all by axle, right? So the vehicles pictured behind us looks like a 10-wheeler or a tri-axle. So all of that is axle weight, and then there are oversized permits that the state will issue a transporter, right? And that's not just for our industry, it could be for people bringing gasoline into the town or any other products, right? So I think we gotta really look at that, because if you have a tractor trailer, the legal weight in a tractor trailer, right? So you've got 1, 2, 3 axles on the tractor, and then you probably got 2 to 3 axles on the trailer. So now you're talking 6 axles. Well, the legal weight of that on a state road via Federal Motor Carrier is 99,000 pounds plus 5% for overweight, right? So by in and of itself, your bylaw discriminates against federal law, it discriminates against the state law, and this is a state road. So, you know, the bylaw as written is discriminatory towards an operation, and it is a state road that the town doesn't have jurisdiction on. So we have some issues relative to how that was written, why it was written, and it doesn't seem to embody what the federal government passed down to the states, and then what the state has put in place on its roads. So that's that piece of it. But
So can I interrupt for a second? It's my understanding that the 80,000 pound weight limit is the state reg, but you can get a permit, a special permit to exceed the 80,000 pounds. Because I know a number of people in the business, and that's what they've all told me. 80,000 is the state reg, right? And then if you have to, you can apply for a permit or license or whatever it may be to exceed the 80,000 to get to like 103, I think might be the max.
104, right? Yep. So number of axles, 80,000 for the truck seen behind us in the picture, right? 3 axle, 4 axle dump truck is going to be 80,000 plus a booster. A tractor trailer with 3 axles on the tractor and 3 axles on the trailer is 6 axles, and that base weight is 99 plus a 5% booster.
So how many tons can you put in a tractor trailer? Don't. Steel body,
Aluminum bodies are lighter, so, you know, but somewhere
30 tons?
about 199,000 pounds legally, right, is the weight. So somewhere around 30, depending on the tractors, because if you buy a heavy tractor and a heavy trailer, then you're going to haul less. But anywhere from say 25, maybe up to 29 or 30 tons, maybe a little bit over that. 32 tons on a flow boy would be a live bottom trailer that's all aluminum. So somewhere in that vicinity, somewhere in, you know, so
So I
we
was
could-
told that a steel body tractor trailer weighs roughly 25,000 pounds. Steel body, most people are going to aluminum bodies now, right? And if you could put 30 tons in it, you're at 85,000 pounds.
where's the tractor?
I'm sorry?
The tractor plus the trailer.
It's 25,000 pounds, that's what I'm told. Total dry weight without anything in it.
I don't really think this is the appropriate place to debate.
Well, I'm
'cause
just,
we
I'm
could
trying
go,
to determine.
is that a Mack? Is it a Red River float boy?
My question is why do you need that exceedance to go to 100,000 pounds?
104?
Whatever, 104, you know, why do you need that when we could talk regular numbers and know what regular numbers come out, and you know, I think 80,000, the state doesn't just use 80,000 as an arbitrary number, and you know, they're not being arbitrary and capricious when they do it. They'll give you a special permit to run a higher limit inside of a truck, but they don't just allow it on a day-to-day case for every Tom, Dick, and Harry driving down the road in a tractor trailer dump body, do they?
I think the best thing to do is everybody get educated on the federal motor carrier safety regulations, and then how that is translated into the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and Commercial Vehicle Enforcement. Perhaps maybe even have a commercial vehicle enforcement officer come here and discuss the regulations, because you and I could go back and forth on this, and the reality is that it's all driven by axle weight, right? Per axle, per weight. So a tractor trailer has more axles on it than a triaxle or a 10-wheeler dump truck. So the weights are going to differ. So it is 80,000 pounds is the threshold for a triaxle and a 10-wheeler. It's not for a 6-wheeler. It's not for a trailer. So I think there's quite a bit there, and there's quite a bit back to details. There's quite a bit of detail here that needs to be worked out, and the industry moves aggregate and in multiple types of units: flow boys, trailers, triaxles, 10-wheelers, 6-wheelers. I mean, the town would come in. I think that you guys go somewhere else to purchase your materials, but you may have a 6-wheeler or a 10-wheeler. Well, you can't put 80,000 pounds in a 6-wheeler. You can't put 80,000 pounds in a trailer behind a F-350. So, you know, it all comes down to axle weight and what the DOT says, right? So I think that's where you got to start. We got to get educated on that, and then I think we can talk about the rule. But there, one broad brush stroke of 80,000 pounds, in my opinion, is illegal and discriminatory, given that that is a state road. As it comes to the,
But when we keep talking about this road being a state road, how do your trucks get to this state road without accessing one of our roads? So, you know, it's a lot of weight, and if you go over to, I pointed out to everybody on Alden Road where the old pasta house is, it's called Boca Restaurant now, right at the 240 set of lights where the Walmart is, and you take a left to go, and you look at the road, the way it's collapsed. Yeah. That's from heavy trucks. That's not from a passenger car, because Fat Albert's driving down that road every day in a passenger car. That's from heavy trucks. Same thing on Mount Pleasant Street. Same exact things taking place. So you can't say that the weight of those vehicles aren't having an impact on our roads, because it surely is having an impact on our roads. And you're not flying by helicopter to get to into your South Main Street to get into your quarry. So you're using municipal roads to get there. And it does have impacts on our roads, and that's the only reason why I'm looking at the weight thing is, you know, that's a lot of weight in a vehicle. And God forbid that truck tries to stop if there's a school bus or something like that. That's a lot of weight to try to stop.
but just to clarify, right? South Main Street is a state road, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's our driveway entrance, correct? Okay. I don't really have anything else to say.
Wow.
It's a state road.
It's a state road that's in bad condition. It's horrible.
In a thoroughly settled neighborhood,
Yes.
I think not all's being taken into consideration
So
here.
if you want to speak, we'll ask Mr. Hill to step down, and then you have to come to the podium, announce your name,
please. Douglas Thomas, South Main Street, Acushnet, obviously. Kevin, I just don't think there's any negotiating on this. He has a mindset. Yes, we all know this is a state highway, but it's in a town, a small community, heavily trafficked, as we know. We get stuck behind the school buses, rush hour in the morning, rush hour in the afternoon. These trucks are hauling a lot of weight, not only through the state highway, but side roads. Look at what's going on with these side roads, as you mentioned, in front of the Boca restaurant. Roads are horrible, and they want to drive these heavily loaded trucks down the road. They're not taking care of our side roads. The state can barely take care of the state highway, as we know with the potholes. And to get a pothole filled from the state, you might as well go to the dentist, because it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen overnight. I think that he needs to be a little bit more open and considerate and have a conversation in regards to, yes, this state highway is in our neighborhoods. And I just don't think the approach and the attitude, because this is a state highway, seems to be unnegotiable for him. That's what I have to add.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if I may, just for the record, would Mr. Thomas just make clear he's speaking individually and not as, you are a member of the Conservation Commission?
Yes, I am.
So I just want to make sure we're clear on the record what capacity Mr. Thomas is in.
Yeah, he also lives on South Main Street.
And I also have been actively involved in this case from the get-go before I joined Conservation. So yes, I am an active member to the conversation, but my opinion, my feelings, my thoughts still stand from day one. And I do live on South Main Street, and I endure the noise, the dust, the odor, and it's impacted my life in many, many ways. And I will continue to fight the fight and make it a fair fight. But let's be open, fair, and negotiate, and not come to the podium with an attitude, it is a state road. We know that, that's fact. But let's be fair here and negotiate and have an understanding and not push a weight limit. And let's be satisfied. We're able to operate, we're able to be in compliance with all of these things. We wouldn't be here if P.J. Keating, from day one, was in compliance, and number two, they didn't put that horrible town monument at South Main Street on the road.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Kevin Smith, Lawson, 161 Lawson Avenue. I'm surprised, but I agree with Mr. Hill in what he said about all the details. The documents that we come up with through this peer review need to be put down in writing. P.J. Keating needs to sign them, and we also have to have the penalties and the process through which we go to, where they can't just do what they want like they've been doing. They go through the process. If it gets to the point where a board is put together and has a cease and desist because they're not following the rules, then they shut down, not throw their weight around because they got multi-billions of dollars that they can do to push the little town of Acushnet around. We've asked for them to be a good neighbor. That's what started this whole mess. I really can't see how their business plan is seeing this, the millions or billions of dollars they've lost. And there are trucks. I come home, I have Friday afternoons off right now with the company I work for. I came down, I witnessed a truck, he's probably traveling 50 to 60 miles an hour down South Main Street going into the, Mr. Gasper and I had to talk about it. And what we do. We've heard before from the P.J. Keating people that, well, it's not really our responsibility. Well, maybe then we need to take and have them pay for a police officer to police their vendors and start issuing citations. Put a DOT trooper out there, weigh them, make sure they're adhering to the specs. If that's how they really want to push this. The other thing, You come up here and you say, well, we have 6 points. There was 22 issues initially in violations to PJ Keating. We want to see all of those gone through and what the resolution of them are. Some of them may already be taken care of, but they're important to the neighbors. They're important to the environment around here. Okay? The other one, I see on the scope of work, it talks about mining, air emissions and dust, noise, stormwater, and wetlands. When all this started, PJ Keating had to put out a dust mitigation plan that they were supposed to adhere to and follow, and it was filed with NEMSHA, I believe it is, the Federal Mining Association. Where is it? Haven't seen any more of that. That needs to be brought into play as well. This is what they said they were going to do, and it didn't seem unreasonable. Let's do it. Make sure, you know, I mean, the air emissions, the state paid to have monitoring done. When that quarry opens up, is that going to be done? Is that going to be because we did a baseline when they were shut down. So we know exactly what the dust levels are with no operation. What are they going to do when it starts? Are we going to get one a month or two into it when they're going full steam?
Yeah, so, you have, not in this one, but in the original one that you had given us with the state, federal, and local regulations that they would need to follow, correct? And that's all outlined inside the statement.
Okay.
I'm sure he's gonna give us an update.
That will be part of our overall memorandum.
Okay. That's fine. I mean, that's, apparently that's what they need. I mean, he's new. He hasn't really had this plant under full operation. So like you, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Prove it unless you're, I mean, and the other part as far as renewal, the renewal process on this, my thinking, there's no board of selectmen that can give out permits in perpetuity. From what I read in the court documents that came out of this mess here. There's no board that's authorized to do that. So you have to have a renewal process.
Hmm?
So if they follow all the rules,
Correct.
make it easier. I get that. But that's up to you guys too.
It is easy though, so we
It's-
do it with
it's
liquor
easy.
licenses every year, right?
Yeah, it's
not
easy.
like it's
As
not
long
like
as you
it's rocket
follow-
science.
As long as you follow the rules and you go, I mean, we've been talking, the asphalt plant is up and running. I mean, have there been a lot of complaints about that? I don't know. I'm not home during the day, so I couldn't tell you. They did do some work around the facility. I haven't been in there to see it. I've been invited in there, but I haven't had a chance to go over. Let's, just keep being a good neighbor, that's all. And end this nightmare. This is almost 5 years now. This is crazy. The money you guys have lost doing this is insane. That's all we need, Like I said, the important thing is that air emissions. That's gotta be done when they start running again.
There'll be guidelines, there are guidelines. I
And set
mentioned
up the
that- I mentioned
guidelines. That way it's easy.
I mentioned-
Keating comes in and says, hey, this is what we have, like a contract. This is what we have. The selectmen, well, this is what we have, and you violated this, or the selectmen, no, you're wrong with this. The other thing on this road out here, this wonderful Main Street, are you aware that the state is trying to shove that down the town's throat? What do you do at that point? Then it's a town road. It's a public road. So that creates a whole nother nightmare for you guys. And I think,
That's why
I think it's a good thing, you were talking about the independent, like an auditor. You do it, and that keeps everybody, the town's out of it, and it can be done like the peer review group. Both sides pick who they want to come in and do it, and move on. Let's just get this ended. But we need to see all those items and what's the resolution to all of them. And I think that's what you're trying to do. So, I mean, you can't, as much as they would like to just go through the 6 and say, let's be done with this, do we get a permit or don't we? No, let's see what's happened to the rest of it.
Mr. Chairman, just to chime in, that was never the process. Just as 6 were, we don't want
No,
to
no,
have, let me finish, Kevin. We don't want to have a 6-hour meeting where everybody's at each other's throats. The reason why we decided, Mr. Chairman decided to streamline this was so we could actually get things accomplished. We're already off track here. We all have valid concerns. Everybody wants to get their point across, I understand that. Every single thing on this application that they provided, that they had questions on, and wanted variances or more clarification, will be answered in a public hearing for you.
No, I
for
understand
everybody
that
here.
about what was shown tonight.
Correct, so
I mean,
Geosyntec
I'm
put
surprised they
together,
didn't either.
put together
That's-
this because that's what
Yep.
they could provide in the short time
In
we
the
have
short-
tonight.
right.
Doesn't
Okay.
mean that next
I understand
meeting,
that.
we're not
I knew-
gonna talk
I knew
about
about that, you know.
We're kind of
going
starting
in,
from the front of the
whatever.
application to the back. I know some people
Right.
might want to start from the middle and
No,
end it at the
no.
end, but that's not what
No, you
we're
gotta
all
go through
about.
the
So
whole-
again,
whole
Mr. Leggia,
application. Right.
and I have the letter right here, to
Yep.
the beginning of it, he had a lot of concerns about the
Mm-hmm.
permit application process, and we've asked Geosyntec to address that.
Right.
And so that we clear the air. And that's what we really need to do is, it doesn't matter whether somebody wants to talk about number one, if it was mentioned in the application, we owe it to the people to talk about it. And we owe it to PJ Keating to at least address it so they know our point of view on issue number one. We might only talk about it for 2 minutes, but we want to talk about it and understand it. And there's certain things in there I think they understand now.
It's a negotiation. There's gonna be some give and take on all parts. I mean, it's like the neighbors. Everything isn't gonna be perfect. I mean, we're not gonna go out there and smell roses. We're near an asphalt plant and a quarry.
Correct.
We know it's not gonna, but it has to be tolerable. And it has to be agreeable to all parties involved. And that's all we're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. D'Souza?
Christian D'Souza, 46 Lower King Ave. In looking at that topographical, after Mr. Hill's presentation about the truckloads, I don't see a clear line of travel anywhere from that plant to a subsequent highway. I see densely populated neighborhoods that are families, elderly residents, you know, and I don't know how many. So I don't see how they can justify wanting to fight and pick a fight about the size of the load. How many houses and families do you want to disturb every day with 965 trucks that has still not been determined how that was calculated inside the amount of hours worked? I still don't know how they justify or come up with 965 trucks a day.
Well, I just
So,
gave you, I gave you, it's one a minute, right? For 15 hours
Well,
straight.
that's, but Mr. Hill clearly stated it's not 15 hours of
So that
of
magnifies
scale.
six. So
we
instead
still didn't.
of, so instead of one a minute, it might be 2 a minute, right? Obviously, if you take time away from the allotted time that I give you,
I just didn't get
that's
it.
more frequency, right? And then that's even more problematic. So I think that's something that that's one of the things that we gotta,
And like I
address.
said, I mean,
we gotta hash that out.
that's just a portion of the line of travel that these trucks have to take to get to 140 to 195 or whatever. And, I mean, it all looks pretty densely populated to me, and I don't think it's justified, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, can I just make the same request for Mr. D'Souza that he just make clear for the record what capacity he's speaking in as an individual or as a member of the Conservation Commission?
I didn't
said his
say
name
anything
is
about the
Adams.
concert. I said 46 Lower Keene Avenue.
So you're speaking, okay. I just wanna make
46
sure.
Lower Keene
That's
Avenue.
what I'm talking about. Come on.
That's unnecessary.
Oh,
That's unnecessary.
I'm a member of my town's Conservation Commission. Anytime I go to a public meeting in my town, I start by saying I'm here individually on my behalf. I've seen that happen routinely. I'm not trying to harass anybody, I just want to be clear for the record. Thank you.
I just want to say something real quick. I won't take long. Cheryl Bryant, 25 South Main Street. You're talking about the weight of the trucks. I can sit in my house right now, somebody goes by and hits a pothole, not even in front of my house, my whole house can feel it, my whole house. It's been there over 100 years. But it's like trucks go by and the house, you feel it. So more weight, you know, more trucks. If you look at South Main Street, I've been there 30 years. And you look, and now the cracks are like spited. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot more cracks in that road than there used to be. And it's getting worn. And the state doesn't want to do anything about it. And like everyone else said, it might be a state road, but you're in a residential. You're industrial, but from there on is residential.
You have anything?
I guess my question to you would be, do you want to go through these individually and start a back and forth on each of the items, or as you mentioned, things tend to get well, how do you want to?
Yeah, if you wanna go through, like, number one and just give a comments, your comments on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we covered our comments initially, and I was hoping that we would, the responses would be based on those comments, but it did not go that way, which is understandable, but.
Do you have a new copy of, because this one is your older one. All the number ones, twos.
I can
You have
pull
a-
that up and we can
Is it in there?
discuss that.
Yeah, that's not all of them, is it?
That's the ones that he's presented tonight, off of this
Oh.
original list.
Yeah, but this is all self-explanatory, so.
So they're all, our table is all summarized in that slideshow, it's just out of order
Yes,
based on
yes.
the document we received this morning.
Yeah, no, but that's not, yeah, no. That's what this is, right?
This is the trusted variances, when they applied for their application, this is the 18
Yeah, but we
items.
can't, thanks, Jamie. Do you have a copy of this, Mr. Leggio?
Are we talking about the original geosyntec?
The 1
table?
through 18?
I do have
The
it.
only thing we've provided, so.
I have, so there's the original 18, listed 18, and then there's the, what I call it, streamlined list.
Right,
of
that's not our
six.
document.
Understood, yeah, no, I'm just saying, the reason we sent the streamlined list was just we thought it might help focus the discussion tonight on the issues that are probably most likely to need some discussion. So I'm happy to just, do we want to start with that shorter list, Mr. Chair, or would you
Yeah,
rather
we can
go-
just go, I mean, if you want, I'd like to just get through, I mean, number one's pretty simple, right, to be determined. It's basically the final soil permit fee.
Yeah, so I think our position on that is we'd anticipate a filing fee similar to what was paid in past years, in the absence of anything else to give us guidance.
Right. And then the second one is, I mean, obviously, we agree. The only question that I would have on the anticipates 113 acres. I think you mentioned two different numbers inside your application. One starts with 113, the other one goes to 230 something.
I think the difference in those numbers might reflect the actual sort of quarry operations itself as opposed to the entire property.
So the entire property is 381 or something like that, right? But inside the application is two different numbers. So it's either you're gonna owe 1,130,000 or you're gonna owe, you know, exponentially higher than that based on the other number that's inside the application. Do you know what that other number was inside the
I
application?
don't have it off the top of my head. We based our review off of the impact area.
I think, yeah, I think the 113
So there's two different
is-
mentions. I'm not gonna sit here and waste too much time digging through the application, but I do remember what I've read. And it was a little bit confusing because in one segment you mentioned that, call it the 113, and then somewhere else inside the application it mentions a 200 and something number, that's all.
Doug might be able
I can
to.
answer
So I
that.
guess it's about the open face, right, and what's considered the open
Correct,
face.
Mr. Chairman. So 113 is the hole that you're looking at, and then all the sundry acreage around it, where we're processing and doing things of that nature. That makes up the bulk of the remaining active parcel, so to speak. And then, of course, we have all that property behind us.
Yeah.
It's out of picture.
But we can easily
we could just take a look
clarify
at
that,
that later
right?
on. So another one, you kind of just, I want to say it's Mickey Mouse, but it's Mickey Mouse, right? I mean, we don't need to get too hung up on a number.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is I understood geosyntec to be basing sort of comment 2 here, talking about, sorry, is this the bonding? Yeah. To be based on the 113, I think we would agree with that. I think that's what we would
Yeah.
imagine.
I mean, so the open portion of the quarry that you look down in right now is about 113 acres. I think the other potential argument, but no, we're not gonna make it,
would be where we're actually mining for that particular year. That obviously doesn't include 113. So, you know, right now, the way that our bond is situated, at $100 million, if you added the 10,000 extra for the other 0.13, the long end of the day, 1.13 isn't a big difference from what we're paying right now, so it's a bond.
So we've already hashed out the 80,000 pound. I guess there's a disagreement at this point. To the 99,000 pound.
Well, and I'm noting that Geosyntex got a note to sort of as an action item to follow up. So, yeah, I think there's more to be discussed there.
And the vertical banks on number 3, so that's done. Number 4, I'm sorry, requires a 2-to-1 vertical bank for the rock quarry. Obviously, that's pretty obvious that that's not going to be warranted. That would be a waiver. You would need to request a waiver on that, right?
I'm sorry, I just realizing the version up there is a little different than the version I had. I apologize. I think it's generally saying the same.
Yeah, I don't have that version either.
Okay. Oh, okay. Good. Then we're in the same. At least we're in the same boat. At least we're in the same boat.
Yeah. So I guess just probably true that we brought these minutes in our defense. We expected this meeting to happen 3 or 4 weeks ago. So things have probably have changed. And I apologize.
No. Just as I said, I just got distracted a minute. So I'm really apologizing to you, Mr. Gaspar. I didn't fully capture your question.
No, I was wondering what you were looking at, and I'm glad you clarified that, because I'm sitting there going, oh, what's he looking at? I'm looking up there, and I'm like, where'd all those numbers come from? Yeah, that's fine, it's no big deal. That one's more detailed, I get it.
Okay, so I'm sorry, if you...
But no big deal, it's just, so, obviously, we know that the quarry faces would need the 2-to-1 slope is not achievable, right? And that was something that we waiting for, the bylaw. And unfortunately, I got a text message from my town clerk saying that it's still not finalized after all the banging my head off the wall yesterday with the Attorney General. And so it's still being worked out, but hopefully very shortly it'll be done. And we understand that as far as the quarry goes. Quarry walls go, right? Stockpiles and things of the like have to be stabilized at 2-to-1 slope, so that's that. Closure requires an 18-inch thick drainage layer. Kyle, I'll let you talk about this. It says condition, but I mean, that's the reclamation thing. We're talking 50 years out. I think we've had this discussion where, you know, how would we know what the hell needs to be done in 50 years when we don't know what your plans are for mining and what the site's going to actually look
or what the town circumstances might be. Yeah, and it's impossible to predict. So I think there's a few of them like
I mean, it's nice to have a general idea of a reclamation plan, so, you know, and then you can't leave all kinds of stuff behind and everything else, but...
Yeah, and that's the basis of the condition, Mr. Chairman, is that,
Thank
you know, you review that closer to the closure date. It doesn't just get thrown away, obviously.
If you have 50 more years of mining, someone maybe 30 years down the road, right, is going to have to make a decision on what that reclamation would be better suited for the town of Acushnet at that point, right? That's all we're saying.
I think we're all on the same page.
So
oftentimes we refer to the highest and best use of the property, right? And that's with kind of in that community agreement of what that is, because we don't honestly know what the highest and best use is 50 years out.
Right. So suggesting that limiting earth removal permits to a period of 1 year causes extraordinary effort and but we vetted that process out pretty well, right? I think we all agree that we're going to have things in place. I mean, the bylaw's in place that says X, Y, and Z. It is an annual renewal, but that's what it is, and it's not like you're going to have to file an application process year over year. As long as you've been in good standing with the town, you have nothing to worry about, right?
I think that was our fundamental concern. I think we're all conceptually on the same page.
It's basically been that way right along, Luke. So let's be realistic, right? And again, liquor licenses, it's the same thing, right? You just renew them. However, if you have a package store or a bar or whatever that, you know, serves minors and everything else, and they continue doing it, we're going to revoke your license and you're not going to get a new one, right? So it's the same kind of thing, right? Just be a good steward and you don't have to worry about it. So we agree to 6 is good. Mr. Legier?
So, oh yeah, I'm sorry, yes, we're, like we said, we're conceptually on the same page, we'll
Okay.
work through the details, but yes.
So this require a setback of approximately 1,000 feet from a quarry to allow its continued operation. That goes to that 2-to-1 slope for the quarrying, I believe.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think that it might have been a typo. Actually, it should be 100
I thought,
feet.
I wasn't going to assume anything.
Yeah, no, that's,
It is 100.
It's 100 if I'm not mistaken, Mr. I
That's
think.
my understanding.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that's really.
So that basically gets wiped out, right, with the waiver for the 2-to-1 slope of the quarry. Sorry?
The next two get wiped out, 7 and 8.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So then we don't even have to talk about number 8, because that wipes out that one as well, because it's the same thing for the 2-to-1 slope. Number
That one
9.
actually was 1,000 feet, just to be clear. And that's not our typo, the typo was in the variance request.
Instead.
Yeah, no, it was in my typo.
But yeah, the 1,000 feet for number 8 is the appropriate number, but it's still applicable to, or not applicable to.
So number 9, suggestion that the total authority being the board's enforcement officer could shut down operations, thus rendering a permit issued by the board hypothetical and unreliable. I think we vetted that out,
Agreed.
right? Proposed reclamation plan, SWIP outline what is required based on the state and federal standards, and that the standard being applied in the bylaw is arbitrary and limited to the ability to pick the best solution for erosion control. Says here, additional research needed, erosion in the back of the site. Kyle?
So we have updated that and that was based on those conversations of the erosion that has been observed at the site. And I discussed this is one of the points that we discussed during our presentation is we do recommend that unstabilized areas that are not actively being used in the mining process be stabilized within 90 days.
Would it be appropriate to provide some context relative to the 6 months in front of the Conservation Commission with that, and then the ultimate finding by the enforcement officer that we needed an earth removal permit to do any work?
I think it might be useful if I can do it briefly, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you want to do that? Because
Yeah, just so we're all, and this frankly might be more for Geosyntech's benefit than for the board's. But yeah, Keating holds an order of conditions to do that work. That was issued 2-ish years ago.
July 21 or something like that?
Okay, yeah, so a couple
I wasn't
years
here,
ago.
but it was sometime in July.
And so essentially Keating was ready to start doing that work. Last winter, we were pulled in for, as Derek just mentioned, a series of hearings with the Conservation Commission over the course of 5-ish months, where we were under the threat of enforcement for not having done the work approved in that order of conditions. Despite us pointing out to the commission that we have 3 years to do the work. Long story short, in the end, the conservation agent advised the commission that we did indeed need a soil and earth removal permit, before we could proceed with that work. So here we are. So essentially, I'm not sure if maybe Geosyntech's comments were kind of going to that, but we're not ignoring it. We have an order of conditions, but we've been instructed that we need approval from this board.
And you've also been instructed that this board would listen to a temporary permit to do that on an emergency basis without having to go through the full-blown soil removal permit application. And that all you needed to do was apply and ask for it. And we haven't seen an application for that work. If you want to ask for it tonight, I'm sure that, and put together something, I'm sure that we can put together a permit that will allow you to rectify what's gone on over there.
I think that's something we'll need to actually discuss with the wetland consultant. Really, as you know, well, I hear chuckles, but the revegetation to stabilize that slope is a major part of what's proposed, and that is time sensitive. So I'm simply saying we just understood. Thank you, Mr. Blake. I think initially after we had that conversation, our thinking was we're filing this application, and we did very quickly after we spoke. The hope was that this process would be wrapped up a little more quickly. So here we are. At any rate, thank you for reminding us. We'll certainly...
To that end, though, we have been proactive in managing the silt fence, and we have gone back with the hydroseeder to reestablish. So without going in and violating what came out of the Conservation Commission, right? Because in that meeting, the
code enforcement officer also said that we needed to go to the Board of Health because the fines was a municipal solid waste. So we got a ruling on the simple fact that that was not true. It's not a municipal solid waste, and the fines can be deposited back into the hole or sold. We can't sell any material because we don't have an earth removal permit. And so, but we have been back there to make sure that no further degradation of the wetland buffer area has occurred, and that includes hydroseeding of those of any area where we've had erosion or restaking the silt fence, and we monitor that.
And if I may, nothing in the public record that was stated at public hearings has ever been rescinded to say that the Soil Conservation Board is willing to allow us to do the work. So, I mean, perhaps a letter from the Soil Conservation Board that says, we're amenable to you guys going in there and doing the work despite the fact you don't have an earth removal permit would go a long way, because that's still on the record from what Mr. Hannon has said. So nothing's changed that.
Well, typically the way it goes is you ask us, right? A quick letter. Between council, I got that information from the board a while ago. I understand your response to it was we shortly after filed this and we were hoping it would get done. But if you would like that on the record, a brief letter, probably a paragraph to this board, could be taken up at another hearing or another meeting, and it could be on the record that they would allow it. I think what the condition here says is revegetation. At this point, it sounds to me like you've done it for now.
That's correct.
But because of the season, right? Mm-hmm. Wouldn't the problem become if you got in there and started disturbing that side of that silt pile? You got a lot to remove. The silt pile's not small. And then you'd have to slope it 2 to 1, right? By the time you're done doing all of that, you would never be able to seed and grow vegetation to stop erosion again from occurring this season, right?
That's correct.
And that's exactly what I was driving at, Mr. Gaspar, when I said that I think it's something we would just need to discuss with the wetland consultant, because that's exactly what I'm imagining would likely happen if we started the work.
When we went before the Conservation Commission, we presented a plan. Keating spent $75,000 on engineering, soil analysis, all of that, only to come back in April and be told, a moving of the goalposts, oh, by the way, it's municipal solid waste, which was not true. You need an earth removal permit, which was never raised in the 5 months of meetings that we showed up at. We had to walk away, and I would not advocate at this time of the year, because the seasonal growing season is getting ready to close, right? We've got a couple weeks left. To your point, the scope of work out there is large. When we went before the board, we had a plan to start that work in May, right? Which would allow us to get vegetation on, and then in the fall of that year, this was 22, the fall of that year, we would have had the soil scientists there looking to plant, right? Where we're in that buffer area. But now but this would be the absolute wrong time to open up that material, because we can't get substantive growth on it, and with heavy rains and all of that coming, we would end up with a big mess out there that nobody wants.
Okay.
So.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, if I may, so if it's okay with you guys, if you want to speak to your wetlands gentlemen, put together an idea of a plan and get back to us, and then we can readdress it at a future meeting, just to have some idea of when, or what you're going to plan to do it, when you're going to plan to do it, and then we can just add it to this.
I think we could probably largely repurpose what was submitted to the Conservation Commission, as Mr. Hill just mentioned. I mean, it was a fairly long process. It was a detailed process. We submitted a lot of information, and we had essentially gotten to a point where we'd all agreed, okay, here's an expedited schedule to go ahead, and then the rug kind of got pulled out. So
what was that? I apologize. What was that you filed in 2021? Is that a notice of intent?
Yes. Yes.
So that notice of intent expires in 3 years?
The order of conditions is the
July 24.
Yeah.
So that's my point, right? So July of 24. So I'm hoping that we'll have a regular soil removal permit So I don't know if that's a mute point, Jeff,
Yeah.
now, because it is.
I was merely correcting the record with
Yeah,
my
I
comment, and
hear
I
you.
didn't mean to trigger a 15-minute back and forth, but.
Okay?
We're at 11.
So number 11, no earth should be removed, and it's the elephant in the room, is the 4-foot, spring high water table based on the elevation established in a test pit and piezometer at the level related to the permanent monument. Recommend that a condition be put in place that PJ Keating confirm the elevation of groundwater at the quarry locations piezometer should be agreed upon between the town and PJ Keating. And obviously, a waiver would need to be provided. Obviously, you can't quarry 4 feet above the spring high water table mark, because you would only be 4 feet in the ground.
So I'm going to defer to, I think Drew is much better qualified to speak to this.
Drew Smythe with TRC.
Please go to the podium.
Drew Smythe with TRC. So, as you were talking about a test pit or a piezometer, there's no better test pit in the world than a quarry, right? It's a huge hole in the ground. It's the best possible place to monitor water. Piezometer is just a thin tube with a tiny opening at the bottom. Chances of getting a good and accurate reading from that are very low. The quarry is the groundwater level. It's a huge cut into the earth. So whatever the water level is in the quarry, that is in fact the groundwater. It's just that simple.
Well, Dave?
You're right about the rock, but this is about the spring high water table. So there's soil that's above the rock, and knowing how the groundwater flows in that soil is what is being, I think, referenced in this condition. So knowing where the groundwater is and how it's going to drain eventually, if there are fractures of the rock into the quarry. You don't want to, the board does not want to see the groundwater fluctuate around the greater perimeter, right? People have wells.
I really have a hard time understanding this, because
So
the earth above is
rock-
a perched water table, if anything. There's very little water in that overburden material. So, you know, all the water goes through the rock. It drains into the quarry.
I think it flows towards
And you
the
can't
river.
possibly not, I mean, the water, you're talking about the soil up here. The bedrock is way down here that it's been excavated. So what are you saying, you can't quarry at all? I don't.
No, but the way the rule is worded, they want to know the high spring water table. And the only way you can do that is through piezometer in the soil.
There was an idea there that was listed as a test pit. How do you test pit? You dig a hole. There's a hole at the site. It's a very big hole. How can that not be equivalent to the water table? The bigger the hole, the more representative the water is.
So you're saying in the soil next to the quarry, there's no water?
It's been drained through.
Water
It's
is runoff, it's going towards the
runoff is
river.
different than ground.
Excuse me.
Gentlemen, just to get some levity here, there's not gonna be water in the quarry if they're mining, correct?
It's dewatered.
Correct. So, I
There'll
think
always
when
be a
I,
low point in the quarry, because we'll always have a quarry pond.
okay. So I think some clarification was needed, because this is not gonna work going back and forth. This whole item is to come to an agreement on how we can find where the spring water, high water table is. If the quarry is being pumped out regularly to mine, that's not gonna be an accurate depiction anyway, correct? If you have a pump actually pumping water out of it, it's not gonna be an accurate depiction of where that water level is, correct?
Well, the water is not always being pumped out. Like right now, it's not always being pumped out.
Correct. We're talking about, this is a soil removal application, so they can get back to work. So if they receive this permit and they go back to work, they're gonna be pumping water out to mine, correct? There's probably gonna be a pump in that hole constantly to keep water. We have a month of rain all of a sudden, they're gonna need a pump going. What I'm asking is, how can you actually measure a water table if there's water being pumped out of it?
So maybe the
That's what I'm just getting clarification. I see where you're coming from, but if it's being pumped out, it's not an accurate measure.
The water table is down low. What you see up top is a thin layer of soil, which is just a water bearing zone.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your justification using a hole in the ground to judge the water table. If it's being pumped out, this thing's about an application so they can mine, so they can work. And we're trying to work through that. You can't mine rock if it's underwater. So what I'm saying is you can't really use that as a justification if that water's being pumped out. Correct?
I have a hard time understanding this.
Are you gonna put dynamite underwater?
Well, no, can I just make a suggestion? This seems like maybe something that would be good, you know, for TRC and Geosyntec to sort of discuss offline. I think they're, speaking for myself, they're kind of talking over my head.
I don't know why we're talking about what's down inside the glory hole, 250 something feet, but Mr. Bonnet, I think that we're looking to establish somewhere on the site a piezometer, whatever you want to call these things, and put it in place so that we identify where the spring high water table mark is somewhere up on the site, not inside the glory hole where they're gonna mine, but somewhere, and at least then you can measure, you have some kind of means of measuring that you're not disturbing the water table coming from the neighborhood on, you know, the outside neighborhood, or where you're draining out all the spring high water table mark, right? Is that really the idea of this thing? Is this, so you know you're not sucking water off somebody else's property? And oh my, like, I know there's a gentleman down out back of the quarry, and he does have his own private well. So I think the piezometer, whatever you want to call it, is in place out back somewhere so that you know you're not disturbing that spring high water table to a degree, and you're hitting a vein inside, and that's what they're pumping out of their quarry, and it's going to drain out all the water from the aquifer and everywhere else, right?
And I actually see it as an insurance policy. It's to do a piezometer is very cheap. To monitor it a couple times a year, it doesn't take that much. But if there's a issue with some water off-site, they're going to point to you, and you've got records showing, you know, the spring high water table being at a constant level. I think you're covered. But if we start to see there's a major change in that, then people are going to want to know and understand what is happening to cause that change in the water table.
Excuse me, so how deep would you want that piezometer to cover, for one thing? And whereabouts on the property would you want it? All the wetlands that are behind are perched on bedrock. That bedrock continues out back. The wetlands that are beyond the transmission line are there because the water is perched on top of bedrock, okay? So we know that we're not impacting those wetlands, otherwise they would be drained, okay? So I'm just not clear on where you would put that piezometer in a bedrock environment.
But you're not saying in bedrock, I'm saying in the soil that is adjacent to.
So the 15 feet of overburden?
I would even think it's, I don't know. I know the river is there, and there's probably groundwater flow from around the quarry to the river, and that's what I would suggest we want to measure.
Mr. Hill?
Why don't you guys get together, figure it out, and if it's as simple as putting a piezometer in the wetlands, that we can get approval to just put the stake there to get a baseline and do all those things that you just said, we'll figure, you guys, we'll get to yes on that.
I think that's what makes the most sense. It'd probably be a condition of the permit.
Right, something to that extent. These guys will agree on something, and we can use some satellite photography, and if it's one or two spots, we've got a few different spots of wetlands that we can look at, and there's existing water there.
Mr. Smith, you have a comment on piezometers?
Well, I have a comment on what they're talking about with the water.
Okay.
Every year, I'll go hiking out there. I have a dog. I take him for a walk out in the back. And that fluctuates yearly. The swamps right now are dry. even with all the rain we've had, they're pretty much dry. And I walked all the way, almost to 240. You can go from my house at the end all the way out, and right now they're dry. And then probably another 2 months, they'll start coming back up again.
Sure.
And usually, you know, I mean, I'm not saying it has anything to do, I'm just telling you what's out there right now. Because I've been out there, I was just out there a couple of weeks ago. You know, and you can see it. It's a natural occurrence. It's been happening for years. Up and down. There's a natural spring that comes from behind Alden Court, comes all the way through, along, and comes out in the back, and there's that, I think it's 36-inch pipe that goes underneath, out to where it goes out to the river. That's, you can see the watermark with
Same
that.
thing occurs in my cellar with sump pumps, right? Summertime it's dry, come the fall, when you get a little bit of rain, that water, because the heat's just not drying out of the ground, and next thing you know, your pumps are running for the next 7
My
months.
question on that, I mean, yeah, I understand what he's saying about the quarry, but that quarry is how many feet below the river?
Yeah.
So you got a low water mark there, that's not, my understanding with that is you're looking for the high water mark and monitor that to see where it fluctuates.
I think if they sit down and come up with an agreement.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing anyway, because we can sit here, we can sit here all night arguing high and low. and-
Yep, so, thank you, Mr. Smith, so,
Well,
Mr. Legier, you have something to say before I continue on 12?
I do not. I was just
Just return it back.
preparing. Yes, prepare.
Number 12, it talks again about reclamation plan, and terms should be clearly defined, stabilized areas. I think this is, we've already discussed this enough, is that true, Kyle?
Yeah, unless, I mean, it was pulled from our original, the streamlined version did not include this, so my understanding is.
Yeah, again, the same reclamation plan issues we talked about.
So we agree with reclamations.
Kick it down the road.
It'll have a condition.
Yep. 13, the requirement of filling the pit with soil every 300 feet doesn't fit how a quarry pit is constructed. We agree to that.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement there.
You think? Or do you know?
I know we are. I think you are.
Kyle?
Yep.
It says approval, right?
Agreed.
Okay. Proposed changes verbally indicated during, that's all I have on that spot, not applicable. 14. Operations at the quarry main, no change. Oh, yeah, this is that chatter stuff, right? Kyle, no comment on 14?
Well, our comment is if.
You commented earlier?
Right, we discussed this during our
Just if
presentation.
there's any dramatic changes in, I guess we'll call it the site plan?
Sure. Yeah, operations,
Operations, site plan.
So what I understood Mr. Maxfield to be saying earlier was essentially this is the type of thing that would come up in that annual review process, right? That you have the application before you that describes what Keating's proposing for the next year. At the end of that year, if a permit's granted, when we are doing the annual report, if there are going to be any changes to the operation, what's expected, what's anticipated, that would go in there. I think we're all on the same page.
Agreed, but I think that goes to be even before the permit is approved in the first place, too. Before you start operating, I know you're in the process of updating operations and coming up with your optimum operations to keep things in the tolerances. If that's not what's in the current application, the application should.
We can easily meet with the board, show the latest drone footage, point to active area of the mine for the particular year, show a contingency if we hit a slip or change in geology. If you go out there, you'll see there is actually several different geological formations in there. There's a basalt. The basalt doesn't really, it doesn't react, doesn't play nice with fine-grained granite. Because it has a different specific gravity, it has a different absorption level. So for introduction into ready-mix concrete or hot-mix asphalt, basalt will change your testing, it puts your QC plans right out of whack because it's different than a fine-grained aggregate. So but we can simply, on an annual basis, talk about those things. And to your point, if we're going to make a capital investment and a change in
you know, in the operations, from time to time, we'll move haul roads, or we'll do certain things like that. And we certainly know that in advance, and we can bring that to the board, so you know where we're actively mining. You'll also know what the future state of a haul road might be on the property. And any changes to the facility itself, the finishing plant or the jaw or any of that, we can share all of that.
But I think just to be clear, Mr. Chair, for the purposes of the application that's before the board, there aren't any changes. I wasn't at the site visit with Geosyntec. My understanding is that this comment might come from discussions and conversations that were had on site. They were talking more long-term type issues or planning, nothing that's proposed immediately in the next year or so.
Yeah, that's fine. If that's, I think, Kyle, that's
fine. But
we
that's
were
what's
more
done.
talking like if there was a dramatic change, right?
Yeah.
Where, you know, the crushing plant was gonna be moved, the asphalt plant's gonna be moved. Obviously, that's something that needs to be brought to the town before you actually start doing it. Unlike what happened 2017, right? There was a discussion about moving the asphalt plant. We had that conversation with town boards and the former president, and then the next thing you know is screw the town, just move the plant out front. That's what I think we're leaning towards now, is let's not have that happen again, right? I think the company owes it to the town to say, if you're gonna make that dramatic of a change to the site, you kind of owe it to the town to come and at least talk to us about that and make sure that those changes are okay, because that's an alteration of the application that we approved in the conditions, the site plans conditions that we have now, right? It's a dramatic change.
Understood.
Yeah, I'm not talking about moving a couple of parked trucks from the front of the lot to the back of the lot. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a major change to the facility in general, right? Reconfiguring things around. Kyle, that's more of what we're looking at.
Rob Robinson, VP of Aggregates for Keating. Those changes that we're talking about, they don't happen over a very short period of time. They're probably a 2 or a 3 year mine plan change. So you would be notified well in advance of those changes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just for the record, right?
No, I understood.
So that everybody understands. Again, it goes towards that template thing that we're trying to build, so everybody understands, you know, the rules to the game, right?
For the record, though, and it was prior to my time, you know, the comment about the asphalt plant coming to the property, CRH PJ Keating did nothing wrong. We filed a building permit application. We were giving a building permit application to put the asphalt plant up front. So maybe it was done wrong, but in the end, I just want to make sure in a public record that we're not being portrayed as somebody that did something illegal or wrong with moving the asphalt plant to the front of the property. It was approved. It may not have been liked, but we received a building permit. It was within our rights. How we got there, what we did, I don't think it's, it's rear view mirror stuff, so let's move forward. Yeah. But we didn't do anything wrong at the time of that legally, right?
Yeah, and
procedurally, maybe something different, but
and I don't even, it predates me too, and I think Derek sort of took all the words out of my mouth. No need to rehash. I think we're all in agreement that this is forward-looking, and what you're hearing from us is, I think, reflecting what we're hearing from you, which is open lines of communication with what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, that's all. So number 15 is the application indicates blasts will occur on regular business days, usually between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. under favorable weather. And it says needs input from public and health officials on hours of anticipated blasting. So right now you have the ability to blast 3 days a week.
And Rob Robinson again, and we can move those around. We had an agreement last time with the fire chief that was in place at the time that we could blast any of the 5 days, but at maximum 3 times a week.
So I'd love to see that, because I don't recall that at all. I know we've talked about that, Rob, but I don't ever,
and that was right near sort of the end, as it were.
His end?
Before we stopped, as it were. That was agreed, and it was to do with weather conditions and we would only fire in good weather conditions.
Yeah,
And we were allowed also to come in earlier with the town's agreement. We were allowed to come in earlier to set the blast so that we could get the blast off earlier because of the wind conditions.
So I don't know where any agreement was made with the previous fire chief. I do know that there was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday only being two of those days to blast. And I know Mr. Robinson and I have had different conversations over, weather permitting, and if you had 2 bad days, you only get 1 day in. So there was some conversations that we had where maybe we can expand on that. He's alluding that he somehow received permission from the fire chief on that. I would need to see that. I don't know where that is.
So I'll just say, I think some of this, to Rob's point, predates me. So I can look back. If there was a permit, if that was like a condition in a blasting permit, that should be easy enough to track down. What I think you might both, or at least maybe what Rob's thinking of, there was at one point sort of a stipulation, an agreement between Keating and the town. Back at the beginning, so 2020, I think, Jack, it was. Right? And that did, and I forget the precise terms, but it did do essentially what Rob's describing, which was gave Keating some flexibility as to exactly what days they would blast. As Rob said, really more than anything, just to ensure that they weren't stuck blasting on a day when conditions were not good, when the next day they might be very good. But there was a limit on the number of it. So I think I'm remembering what Rob's describing. We can get that to you easily.
Mr. Blake?
Are you suggesting that Keating would accept blasting 3 days a week from 11 to 2, and you pick the 3 days?
11 till 3 for flexibility. I know it says 2,
All right.
but I'm going to ask for 11 till 3 for flexibility in case there's some issues, because there are issues now and again. And by issues, I mean if there's a problem with the shop when they're setting it up, another hour allows the guys the time and they're not trying to rush. If we get to 3 o'clock and we haven't blasted, then we have to stay on the shop all night to the following day. And we would notify the town about that via the fire department.
I think the other thing, and just an appropriate example, at a different facility, Rob and I had a conversation today, and we were scheduled to blast at a facility tomorrow. Rob made the decision not to blast tomorrow after talking with the blaster because of what we got for weather conditions. So, we're not going to go in tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. and load the holes because of, we've got heavy air, right? It's going to be, we're in the middle of our first heat wave of the summer. So those are the reasons why we want, 2 or 3 days in this situation, because we don't want to, blast the day when we know we've got like a predominant wind that's going to take any carry into the neighborhood, or 2, we have heavy air, like a hazy, hot, humid day where we have low ground cover, because that compounds the noise effect and the blast, right? So we want to manage that, and over the years, those are really the best management practices that are being implemented, not only at CRH, but as an industry and member of National Stone Sand and Gravel Association.
To that point, do you have predetermined, specs of when you wouldn't blast, right? If it's like certain heat or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Or is it just a feel?
No, we watch the weather. We look at the weather like a week to 2 weeks in advance all the time, and we pick out the days that we think are good, and then as we get in the air, we change, and we have to tie that in with the blasting company and with the explosives being put on the street to come to the operation as well. Right. There's a cut-off time, and there's a certain time when you have to say, right, we're not going to do it, or you're going to have explosives on the street.
Right. So what's right? I'm just for my own edification. Is it like, okay, if it's 30-mile-an-hour winds, no,
don't do it.
Right. If it's 85 degrees and
hazy, hot, humid,
whatever, like, so you've got those
fog, yeah, those
that checklist or whatever
exactly.
It is.
Yep.
Is that like common knowledge, or is that just
like I said, it's kind of national. It's all kind of comes out of the National Stone, Sand and Gravel Association standards, best practices. CRH has those practices, and then we can certainly we can provide that.
I'd love to know that, just because I think it's
right.
If there's a set standard that we can follow, that we all know what the deal is, and you say, hey, look, this was the weather conditions on this, that's why we didn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, so we're not overly prescriptive, but we also understand the rules.
And we also want to just speak, because this is a public hearing, is that we're not sitting here saying we're going to blast 3 days
Yeah, I
in a
understand.
row every week, right? But we want to have a window so that if we have the holes drilled and we say Tuesday's hazy, hot, humid, we've got fog, we make the call Monday night not to bring the powder trucks, right? Now we move it to Wednesday. If Wednesday's bad, now we're out to Thursday. That gives us flexibility to get them, because at some point we run out of material and we're dead in the water with our operation. So we want to try to be flexible, but that's what it is, and it's simple to publish, and it should be part of our document, right? That, you know, these are the best management practices that we'll have in place. We're not going to blast every Wednesday just because we said Wednesday.
Right.
We're going to use the weather to make sure that we have the least impact.
I think that's fair.
So we've had this discussion before, so, and let's go back to what I know was approved versus what might have been talked about with you and the former fire chief. Because I know the current fire chief has no recognition of 5 days, allowing 5 days. Because I talked to him about that after the comment was made. Are you looking for, say, 4 to 5 days of the week and opening that window up instead of being Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Are you still looking to blast only 2 days out of the week? Or are you looking to blast 3 out of 5 days a week? So there's a big difference, I think, to the people of the neighborhoods where, you know, they're used to only having 2 blasts throughout a week under 3 days, but maybe saying we'll allow 2 blasts a week, but open it up to 4 or 5 days so that, you know, it depending on the weather and things that you need to be in control of. I mean, I think that's...
There may be some times where we would do some development shots or a sump shot or something like that, which is not a production blast, which is a lot smaller. And
yeah, I just wouldn't want. I think
and
that's...
to sit here and say it would never happen. It may happen. We may get into that period of some time in the mine plan where we do a small shot and then a bigger shot. But between 2 and 3 shots in 1 week, that's maxed. That's where we would be. But to Derek's point, once we're in the mine plan and we're rolling, it's probably 1 or even 2 shots a week. But one of our other operations, it's like we average 1.5 shots a week. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes 2. Sometimes
I know about the weather conditions. We've had that conversation. I said I'd be open to, you know, having that discussion when we get to the board and having that discussion, open up that window, right? So we'll figure it out. I'm just curious if it's, I hate to see more than 2 days. Besides, isn't it by law you have to publish your blasting schedule?
We notify the day before. We notify the fire chief. And depending on where we are, we sometimes have to notify the fire marshal in whichever town it is. As well.
And you have to, within a half a mile, don't you have to notify?
If it's near a gas main, with so many feet from any gas main, like 600 feet, I think it is.
I have the blasting protocol from the fire department.
It's either 600 or 500 feet from the nearest gas main, then you have to go through and get pre-approved to do that blast.
Notify the utilities and all that. Yeah.
We also do a robocall that's on us, so we would take anybody that wants to be on the list, including board members, town officials, and we just set up an automated call, a robocall that we do at the day of, saying, you know, as we're closing. So we are expecting to blast between the hours of 11 and 2, and we send that out in the morning.
Kevin, and I know that was something that we actually had as a discussion sometime way back when, as a reverse 911 call out to the townspeople. We were requesting that a long time ago. So that would be very informative, not just through your company, but through our town itself, and even posted on the electric billboards that everybody passes by.
Yeah.
Today we are blasting, tomorrow we are blasting, for better notification purposes.
Can I just comment on that?
Sure.
I remember that discussion, and to do a reverse call every time we blasted, it takes the emergency call out of the reverse call, as it were. So that, and why wouldn't you use our system? We would put you on it and let just the people who want to know, let them know, rather than everybody in the town getting a phone call.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to do that every time.
Well,
it
that's
blasts.
where,
But that's the reverse 911.
That's
No,
what
I,
he's
I
talking
think,
about.
I think that's the way to go. I mean, they should have a sign-up log
Yeah.
from a butters or anybody who wants to be signed up to give you their phone number and say, we want to know, 60 minutes or 1 hour prior to a blast, we want that notification. And it can go to their cell phone, their home phone, whatever it may be, and then everybody can get that notification. I think we make that communication out to everybody.
We do that in all the facilities.
Right, and this is the first time I'm actually hearing that they even do this, so
Yeah.
make that for clarification.
Yep, we do it. So, we'll figure it out. It's,
I
sick
think
one
that's,
out.
I don't think anybody down on North Main Street is gonna worry about when the quarry's blasting, but, I can hear it from my house, but.
Yeah. So, and if anyone wants to be on the list, all we gotta do is get the number, right, and put it on. And we add them, it's easy to add.
So this, Kyle, I'm just making a notice condition. 16, based on peak operation, we talked about this, 440 round trips a day, expect a total average daily trips of 965 when full operation. So we have a note of requiring a traffic study to confirm that the traffic will not adversely impact the public or be contrary to the benefit of the town. The trips should include trips from the concrete facility as well as the quarry and asphalt operations.
I would, again, I think defer to Derek on the traffic stuff. Maybe we covered this, maybe we didn't quite, to the board's satisfaction. You tell me.
It was kind of lumped into everything in one big conversation.
We didn't talk about a traffic study, we just talked about I kind of talked about how ludicrous it was to think you're gonna put 900 trucks on the road a day.
Well, so Doug and I did the math here based on historical information. So we took into account a truck trip is inbound and outbound, right? Because it's not like one-way traffic where the trucks come in off of South Main and go out some future road, right? Somewhere else, right? So inbound and outbound. So a truck comes in, gets a material, whether it's dropping off aggregates, whether it's picking up aggregates, whether it's coming in and picking up hot mix asphalt, or it's an outbound ready mix truck, right? It's coming in to get
it out of the gate.
Right. So that's the number, right? And then what we did was based on the trailers coming in for aggregates, the triaxles coming in for hot mix, customers coming in for hot mix, and ready mix trucks, we just took an average and then said each truck leaves the load, I forget what we said, each truck leaves the facility with X tons on it. But a round trip is half that number times those number of tons, right? So if it's 23 tons on average leaving the facility in every truck round trip, right? That's how we calculated that number.
The way I calculated that number though, based on, 30 tons in a truck, and I just went with the big trucks right now, is you'd only have to operate 10 weeks and you'd exceed your soil removal permit.
I didn't know we had a soil removal permit or, we took our peak volumes of 1 million.
So you have all your soil removal permits have been 800,000 cubic yards, correct?
Cubic yards.
Correct. We go by the density of the material. You want me to get back into that? 1.3 or whatever it may be, so it comes out to the 1 million tons? Do the math.
Correct, but then there's aggregates. That's aggregates, then there's hot mix asphalt, and there's ready mix concrete leaving the facility. So
But that's all part of your earth removal permit, right? It's what's coming out of the ground, 800,000 cubic
Not
yards.
necessarily. We import material to that facility, right? We recycle material. Recycled material and imported material is not part of the earth removal permit, right? So our recycled aggregates that we use, 20%, and we're going to continue to increase the use of recycled products because we are the biggest recycler in the United States, and it is a way for us to be a more sustainable and fully circular business. So we'll continue to recycle materials on the property. So that came inbound on a truck, but it's not going out the gate, it's going through the asphalt plant. right? And the ready-mix concrete, we have, so that's how we came with that number, was we looked at what ready-mix concrete does for volumes, what HMA has done for volumes, and what we've done on our peak years for volumes, including recycling. And that's how we came up with that number.
Mr. Kelly?
The data we have now from the state and Sept and anybody else that has done traffic studies are single trips. So if your 965 is round trips, then we're really looking at, as far as the data we have, 1,930 trips you're talking about, because every traffic study we have is a single count.
So we've got a little bit of apples and oranges comparison.
Yeah.
But the way we read that was round trip, right? Because the truck's coming to the facility empty, it's trip in, gets loaded and comes out, right?
Kind of like aggregate that is hauled in, is eventually hauled out.
In a cement product, that's correct.
Or other product.
Correct.
And so it was based on max production. We looked up the Mass DOT latest counts, and we attributed about 13% of the traffic on South Main Street.
What was the traffic counts, the ones we have, was it 30-something hundred? You got that number? 30-something, 40-something, there's like 3 years of count?
Oh, the average daily? The average daily trips in the area of PJ Keating are 14,950. That's all traffic.
Already.
So if I could just point out one thing as well, with respect to the round trip versus single trip, I think if you look at the comment there, what I believe Derek was describing, it's 440 round trips, 965, right, average. So I think, unless I'm misreading that or misremembering what was in the application.
So that's from your application. So in the
right. So my point.
2016, 2016.
So my point in response to Mr. Kelly's comment is you wouldn't be doubling the 965, which I think you're doing, because that is already.
You just said it's round trips.
I think Derek may have misspoken.
965 is when in full operation. So it's gonna start out at 440 round trip, and then your total average daily, when you're at full production, is gonna be 965.
We could take a look back. That's not, I understood that to mean 440 round trip, 965 total, all talked before.
I just can't fathom having a truck a minute going into that facility. Because that's what the calculations really come out to. And if you reduce the hours from the 15, as Mr. Hill said, some of those hours would be maintenance hours, that increases that frequency, right? So now it's even more than one a minute. There's no way you can put that many trucks inside your facility. That's why I'm a little confused on the truck trip thing. It doesn't make any sense. It's like 300, on a 10-hour day would be one every 2 minutes, and I think that's kind of high. So to look at this number and go, okay, one a minute? I mean, you have no break whatsoever. It's basically a truck coming from that side, a truck coming from that side, and then by the time that truck gets to the gate, there's another truck turning the corner on each end coming into the facility.
Why don't we revisit the numbers and come back and we'll break it out by operation.
Yeah,
we give some rough numbers on that, and then we can get to the definitions that the traffic count study is using, and then what we were using, so we get to apples and apples.
So I just want to share this with you, people that are here. As you know, we've been dealing with Mass DOT and about the consideration about taking over South Main Street. With that, Mass DOT provided for us Jacobs Engineering, Jacobs Safety. I don't know if you guys know them, but they conducted a survey of South Main Street, and we received a draft report, which eventually, once it's accepted, we'll put out in the public. But just some initial numbers that have come through. This isn't anything to do with PJ Keating. I'm just putting this out there for people to understand. From 2015 to 2020, there were 169 crashes along South Main Street, all told, right? And so, and it goes by street by street by street, right? And so I'm not saying it has anything, it's PJ Keating is the cause, but what I'm saying is we know that South Main Street is a really difficult corridor for everybody, right? There's more traffic, there's more distracted driving, there's more of that, right? So
People trying to come out of their driveway.
whatever it is, so just, just full disclosure, I've been very upfront about South Main Street and that it's a problem, and working with Mass DOT to try and rectify that. If that results in the town taking over the road, that's one avenue. It could result in Mass DOT doing the whole project. I don't know. But the fact remains is it's an unsafe road, right? And that's something that is a great concern to me, whether it's during this process or in any process. So I just want to share that. And we'll make that available to everybody.
May I say something about
Now, if that helps, like, you talked about, like, well, you're shaking your head, but that helps us make a case that we should get the truck traffic down to 240 directly from the hack, behind the facility. I think we all agree that would be a good thing, right? So before you shake your head and say, no, that doesn't help.
I know, but where I was shaking my head was the circumstances, and also when you start looking at other roads in and around, sort of conurbation places like this, right?
This is considered the top 5 most dangerous road in Mass DOT.
In Massachusetts?
In District 5. In District 5. The top 5 most dangerous road. And I'm just saying, in general, we've got 4-way stop sign outside of Town Hall, it's a mess. We've got Slocum in South Main Street, it's a mess. Garfield in South Main Street is a mess. Hope, like, all these intersecting streets, an entranceway outside the seafood hut, that's a mess. So again, I think we're just going to take into account the overall safety of South Main Street.
May I just add real quickly? I won't go on.
Sure.
I live at Karen Pinard, 1 South Main Street, Acushnet. Okay. I'd like to also add that is a state road, as we stated, and it is a mess, as we've all agreed. But I want you to calculate not just the amount of trucks per minute, but the distance of 1 South Main Street to the end till North Main Street, and the speed limit, and you will see at that time when you're blasting, you're going to blast after 2 p.m. when we have children getting off and on of school buses. You will be blasting. There will be trucks running in and out. There'll be school buses stopping. People trying to get in and out of their homes, coming home from work at that hour. I would suggest greatly that we do not blast after 2 o'clock. There are children on that road, I've said this a million times. They're waiting for their school bus, there are trucks flying by, there's hot, molten. It's just dangerous, and they're speeding. And, they say I hate truck drivers, I don't. I grew up with truck drivers. My whole family's truck drivers. And they don't speed to town. I have a nice car, it goes really fast. And I can't get over 20 miles an hour on my street. I can't even get out of my driveway. So, I want you to consider the amount of that state highway and the speed limit times the traffic that you're putting on them. And then, of course, add in the hour of blasting and the children getting on and off that school bus. So, thank you.
For the record, just to that comment, we typically try to blast, so the norm was 10 to 2.
I understand
So
that.
the norm is 10 to 2. If something happened and it had to go out, we just wanted to have a buffer. But the norm and the best practice is to make sure that we're shooting in that window and not outside that.
Right, but I just want to express
No,
that I understand you're running a business. I'm not ignorant. I agree with that. I understand the weather, and it is part of your hazard for that industry. But I need you to understand that you are in this residential area, and there are children who live here. We all live here, and you need to consider I know you think we're all a pain in the neck, but we pay taxes too, and we live here. So and it is the most dangerous road, as he stated. And so, thank you for your consideration.
Yeah, no, it's duly noted.
Mr. Kelly, we can do a traffic study, can't we?
Yes. And we've talked to Serpent to also provide us with past years for baselines. And we can...
Keep it in mind, I mean, PJ Keating is not operating like they would, right? You got an asphalt plant that's operating, but it's probably not 100%. And the quarry's not operating, so that's taken away a lot off the traffic, but that's what they will add in their calculations, right?
As long as we're, as Mr. Hill said, as long as we're talking apples to apples,
Yeah.
we can add the number of trips in. That's all the traffic study's going to give us.
Right, right, but then in the traffic study, see, the problem with all of this is, and it's not, look, it's human nature of the growth of a community, right? So, and I talk a lot about the infrastructure. The infrastructure wasn't built for what we're doing today with it, right? The infrastructure was put in 50, 60, 70 years ago, these roads and how narrow they are and the infrastructure in itself. And then we start developing all the land, right? So when these people put these roads in, they were looking at, you know, the town's population might have been 3,000 and now we're at 11,000, right? So they have all those extra vehicles on the road alone, right? We don't have the infrastructure to handle this and all this growth. Everybody, you know, they talk about, oh, new growth, you know, build more houses because we need more money as a municipality, but there's impacts to that, right? And there are negative impacts to the community. It's nice to say, oh, look, we got money from new growth. But if you don't have, like we're all talking about, we don't have the infrastructure to support all these, not speaking of that, but all the vehicles, you've more homes, more family, you know, more members in a family, 3 cars in a family, and you bring in 1,000 more, you got 3,000 more cars traveling on the roads than what you did prior, right? And then you add in all of this into the soup, it's complicated, right? And it's not, you know, you guys have been operating, but, you know, your operation's gotten bigger, and the town's also grown too. So it's kind of a catch-22, what we're all trying to deal with and say, you know, we're trying to say, well, you know, we gotta be mindful of what we're doing for truck trips, but it's also, we should be being mindful of what we've done and created growth and just the normal aspect of life where, you know, back in the day, most families had 1 car. Nowadays, they have 3 or 4 cars in a household, right? Yeah. It's just the way it is. So it's a massive problem. I mean, even with you folks not operating the quarry, you come out here on Main Street, man, and depending on the time of the day, it's a you-know-what show. I mean, I've been here my entire life, and I travel down here sometimes at random times of the day, and I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like, I don't even want to come down South Main Street to go to Fayetteville for anything. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Look what time of the day it is. I just forget about it. I'm all set, so.
3 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll take me between 5 and 10 minutes to go from Seafood Hut to Laura Keene.
You'd think you were in the parade.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the 4 corners down at Town Hall, we see it all the time, right? Anywhere around that 4 o'clock mark to 5:30 mark, it's a hot mess. It's just, most of us know, you know, the sequence is, you go, I go, you go, I mean, everybody kind of knows. If you've been in Acushnet for a while, you just know how to flow, right? Everybody's moving, and once in a while you get that, you know, new person in town that sits there and doesn't know what to do, and you're sitting there going, come on, it's your turn. And he's like, oh, and then you just kind of go and say, the hell with you.
Is there a cut-through route? Is there a cut-through route for other?
Slocum Street,
residents?
Slocum, there's all little zigzags like people can take, like obviously us townies, we know the little side streets that lead you to the same spot, but how many people don't? So it's like, you're getting all the people from Fayetteville, they use Acushnet as a cut through, right? The city's doing the same thing. I mean, it's become it's like a hot spot. You know, instead of them traveling through down Belleville Ave and going through Fayetteville a long way, they're zipping up Slocum Street and Main Street and slamming through our town to get over there to the other side of Fayetteville and New Bedford on Cogswell Street. It's just happening everywhere. It's no matter where you go, you're always being stuck in traffic. So that's why we got to be conscious, sir.
The Jacobs study said that there was more off-peak volume on this road than any comparable road in the area. And they cautioned us because the train stations in New
Coming to
Bedford
town.
are not open yet.
Yeah.
So they expect that to even spike more.
So as we're talking about, Mr. Chairman, through you, as we're talking about this issue, right? I think there's one thing, I think we floated the idea. I know Kevin from Representative Strauss's office here. I mean, if there's a way that, separate from this process, we can collectively agree to like jointly pursue, and Kevin's talked about it, 240, and connecting there. I mean, you guys deal, your DOT's biggest, right? I mean, you've got more connections with those guys than we do, I'm sure, right? So if there's a way to start opening up that conversation, I think that's a really productive use of everybody's time, you know? And
I would agree, right? I mean, we've looked at that. I mean, we understand our parcel of property. We understand our parcel of abuts Fairhaven and land in the town of Acushnet. We understand there'd be good value there. And we certainly know that by going through elected officials that, you know, the current IIJA grant awards, $500 million of that $1 billion is towards reauthorization, but the other $500 million is there for grants. We can file grants, and I'm sure with the elected officials representing Massachusetts, the DOT, we could certainly put a packet together and look and evaluate that. And that would then open up your landlocked property too, generating, you know, an improved master plan, and that of Fairhaven, right, where there'd be additional tax revenue to the town. So we're certainly open to those things. And you know, we're cognizant of that. So,
I think
Selectman Owen is spot on. I mean, that's like the real key solution, right? To getting most of that heavy truck traffic off the roads, right? I mean, I don't think we'd be looking at, you know, right away anyway. It's more of solving the problem of truck traffic, right? All the little guys can still come through the other side, and then obviously if it opened up an opportunity for the town of Acushnet. We own 125 acres back there. A lot of it's wetlands, but and Fairhaven has some land back there too, some economic development for ourselves. You know, and back in the day, I think it was the early 70s or whatever, Fairhaven, somebody rejected it or whatever because they said the feds would never do it for one person, meaning DJ Keating. Well, now it's not just about one person, right? It's about the town of Acushnet, economic development, housing, train station coming. Fairhaven would have that opportunity as well. So the reality of it is I had a quick conversation with one of the chiefs of staff at Congressman Keaton's office, and he said, look, you're way too far in the process, Mr. Gasper. You need to take care of it from a local standpoint, you know, deal with your town, Fairhaven, then do the state, and then once you're done with the state, you can come to us, and Congressman Keating would take it. So if we could get that dialogue going, I mean, we do have a representative from Strauss's office, Rep. Schmidt. He'd be in favor of helping out the town of Acushnet and Fairhaven as well. So I think we got enough people in place right now that are for it. I think if there's ever been an opportunity to pursue it, now is that time.
I mean, the reality is nobody wants our operations in their backyard. But on the flip side, your quality of life, what would your quality of life be? Look at your tax rates going up now and the cost of doing business for DPW. So that quarry is essential and has been a big driver of South Coast economy and will continue to do that forward. So we do need to work together and figure out what is the best alternative to that. And I think that given the current IIJA funding and some things here, I mean, there's opportunity to explore that and come together on something like that, because it would be a win for the South Coast economy. It would be a win for the towns because you'd be opening up additional tax revenue, and we'd be reducing traffic volumes in an area that's already heavy with more future growth with the MBTA rails and all of that coming online, right? And like you said, everyone cuts through here to get to 140 from this side or whatever.
It's only gonna get worse.
Excuse me, Kevin, can I say something real quick?
Sure.
And when you have truck drivers, you're not paying those truck drivers, they're subcontractors. So the faster they get out with that material and the faster they get back, the more money they make, correct?
You know, I don't think that, first of all, in our agreements, we specifically reference all of the federal and state regulations, and we do that every year relative to following your speed, being good citizens, doing all that. So, you know, we do evaluate and keep score on our drivers. So, you know, we want to retain and reward the best.
But that is true, correct? That they're more, they do something. So
Well, they're independent.
they only make so much, they make their money by the truckload.
No, not necessarily. We pay all different ways. We pay by the hour, so the truck could sit there. We pay by the
Depending
time.
on the job.
Correct. So but in fairness, right? There's just different ways. We deliver. So we also deliver materials. So so it's on our dime, and that driver gets paid whether they're rolling or they're sitting, right? So, but you know, so broad brush is that we pay very many different ways. Certainly by the ton is one of those mechanisms, but we pay by the hour, we pay by the cubic yard, we pay wait time if it's a per ton haul, so we do a
And then
bunch
you
of-
have, he's talking about his folks that they employ, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the independent contractors that are going in there and picking up, you know, a couple of triaxles worth of stone, and they're gonna ship out to South Dartmouth or whatever. They're on the clock, right? So they're gonna hustle, they're gonna get in there, grab their load, shoot out there, drop it wherever they're going, and then hurry up and get back because, oh my God, they're gonna close in a half an hour. So yeah, that's where you run into the wily coyotes that are behind the wheel that are in a
And
rush
because
to get in and out.
And because it's a highway, it's 40 miles an hour. Going into Acushnet, which I think
Might
is
not be a
crazy.
highway for much longer, right?
But that's all in dictation, Kevin, to how fast these guys are rolling in and rolling out of town, is how they're being paid by the job, is the bottom
based
line.
on what we hear tonight, I think that, we need to have a conversation with our PD, right? And have, I know they're sitting up there, but maybe they need to spend a little bit more time, emphasizing and not being afraid that if somebody's driving a massive truck like that and they're hitting 50 miles an hour, you tag them, they're not gonna be happy about it, but they're gonna learn that lesson, right?
And I just, my personal,
Main Street there, it's a lot less when they make the turn up there and going down Main Street. We're going down to 30 and 25 mile an hour.
What's that?
in my personal opinion, and I've hauled asphalt, I've walked it, I've rolled in it, I've played in it for many, many years. There's not a reason in this world that any style truck, 6, 10, 12, 18 wheel, that should be coming down South Main Street and jigging
Because they're coming to us.
because they're coming in hot
Curve.
and praying to God that they do make the corner at Seafood Hut and not tipping that rig over and dropping it on the customers that are standing in the parking lot and listening to that jig brake. And the windows in my house are shaking because of that jig brake. And I know at one time, we had put up the no jig brake signs. The state shoved us down the throat on those. I'd like to see those come back.
But in fairness, they did talk to their workers and it did.
It did curb.
Oh,
It's been occurring again. I live in that house right there.
Right at the
and
corner.
it's still
All right,
occurring.
We're gonna move on now.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go to number 17, it's proposed hours of operation, you get in there, it looks like 6:30 to 9. Oh, the way this is written, how's that written up there? 6:30 to 9 PM, Monday through Saturday.
No way.
So this relates to crushing hours of operation.
What's that?
This relates to crushing hours of operation.
It relates to what?
Crushing, processing hours of operation.
Yeah.
And that's currently what it was. That's not loading, that's not sending trucks out, that's not asphalt plant. That is the crushing plant, the crushing of aggregates. That's what the hours of operations were.
So this would be a good example of additional clarity around in the document, right? Because there are multiple activities going on. So to that 6:30 to 9,
was based on crushing. You know, there's a reference in there to the scale, 7 to 4. So, I mean, I think there's, you know, there's an opportunity to provide greater clarity around support service, production hours for crushing, maintenance, all of those different things.
Just for one example, the air permit for Mass DEP has several what I'll call windows, right? So there are 3 windows for hours of operation governing different aspects of Keating's operations on the site. So that's really sort of what I think Derek's driving at there, is there are a number of different things going on at Keating's facilities, and they have different impacts associated.
Sure, you just forgot to go to the microphone and introduce yourself.
I apologize.
No, I'm just joking. You know who you are. Kind of playing this out. You know, I think we get it. Again, it's about the people, right? The community, and being disturbed 6 days a week, and slamming noises and things like that, where, you know, you should be able to enjoy, you know, a certain lifestyle in your home, instead of listening to hammers pounding at 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. at night for your maintenance operations and things of the like. So I think that's something that this board's going to need to consider. As far as the hours of operation goes, it does state in the bylaw that we have that authority to regulate hours of operation. Is that correct, Mr. Blake?
Yes.
So I think that's something that we have to consider after listening to the neighbors and understanding what's going on over there. So, you know, it'd be nice if you gave us that breakdown of, you know, what your plans were. But, you know, 6 days a week, 6:30 in the morning till 9 p.m. at night, whatever that may be. I personally don't see how that works.
Sure, so you're looking for just a little more detail.
I think that, you know, you have your regular hours of operation where the quarry's gonna be open and people can come in and out, right? And then Derek made the point, and I understand the logistics of the quarry, where you would have time to be able to do certain maintenance on plants and things of the like, so you're not disturbing your regular production time. What does that mean? To me, I don't know yet. It's something that I would need to see a better business plan, and saying these are the hours of operation. This is what we'd be looking to do from 6:30 a.m. to, you know, as he said, 4:30 or 5. Be able to run the crushing plant in operations and sell materials and sales, and then at 5 p.m. the gate closes, and, you know, 5 to whatever is up for maintenance and things. Give us that kind of a deal, so that we, you know, it's got to be a condition of the permit, right? That's what I'm. There's no other way around it.
We can do that, and you probably won't like it, but we can do it. Yeah, it's one of those ones that you are probably going to have a bad taste on, but we can definitely give you the.
So that's part of this process, right? You just said it. I didn't say it. You just said we're probably not going to like it, but you, on the other hand, you might not like what our answer is going to be to it, right?
That's correct.
So it's kind of that. It's going to be one of those things, and, you know, the proof's really in the pudding, is whether or not we do something. And I don't want to arbitrarily speak and make decisions, but if we just gave you a set amount of hours, right, and you were really good corporate stewards for a year, and you came back and you said, hey, you know what, just like the cubic yards, you might say, hey, I want more cubic yards, right, and then the following year, well, hey, you know what, we've been good corporate stewards, we haven't had any major catastrophes, any problems with the neighbors and complaints. Yeah, we've had complaints, but nothing out of the realm. You know, we'd like to get an extra hour of operations. That's kind of how you build a relationship and you get to a final goal, right? I don't think it's going to be come right out and open up the floodgates and just go, yep, here's everything that you want, no disagreement, and we move on. So there's that working back and forth that we're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, but I mean, go ahead,
I would say, in the interest of full disclosure, I've talked about staggered permits, right? So if you've got a main operation, standard operating procedure from whatever time to whatever time, your Saturday permit is a separate permit. So if something goes wrong on a Saturday, then that's what we focus on, and you're not getting, you know, a wrist slap for something that went on. You know, you're not getting punished on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. You follow me? Like with liquor licenses, we've got a Sunday permit. We've got different hours of operation. I mean, that's a concept that I floated I don't know if it's gonna get traction or not, but at least it delineates each portion of the business that we then would focus on if something goes wrong. You know, I don't feel it's okay to, you know, I think it's overly prescriptive to shut down an operation for a week on something that maybe took place on a Saturday. That's what we would focus on. At least that's my concept. Again, open-minded to a lot of this stuff, but I think putting rules of the road in place, I think are really good for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, you know, guardrails, right? Clarity in this is gonna be important. I think we all agree with that, so we'll work on that. And we'll also include our air permit. Because our air permits were open to public comment, and during that, our air permits specifically give us defined hours of operation. So that becomes for us what our kind of de facto standard is, and that was open to public comment in those. So we'll start with that and provide additional clarity around that, you know, so support services, any of those sort of things. And many towns that we work on too, there, you know, sometimes there's the condition of we're doing an essential job for DOT. Like, you know, when the elected officials of this state get money, get grant money, the Bourne Bridge is gonna be a big job, right? So there'll be requirements on some of those jobs in an essential facility like this. There might be a need for a specific project to run at hours that in the past, in other communities, we provide that information to the town through the police department. And so they're on notice that, yes, you're going to work on that Saturday night for that essential job. So those are things I think we work out and put in some framework, right? But to your point, we will get back on that with a little more definition. And we'll spell out, you know, because if someone, what we don't want is if someone, like if I go into the facility on Acushnet on a Sunday afternoon to do some work, I don't want to get called out for coming into the facility, you know what I mean? Which is just, but you know, a low bed driver comes in to pick up his low bed and get ready for tomorrow, you know, those, but we can spell all that out by what we do. And that certainly would be something that would be in that joint hosting agreement we're working on.
Yeah, I don't think we'd beat you up if you came in on a Sunday because you forgot your jacket or something, you know. We're not looking to do that.
You're not open on Sunday.
Well, you know, we say that, but that's, you know, different administration, and that's what happens, right? So that's why it's important to have clarity. Right?
So the hours of operation it's pretty simple, right? It's a condition of the permit, again. You're gonna have conditions for the permit.
But I think you'd have the different, we'll get back to you with, this is the crushing hours, these are the maintenance hours.
Sales hours.
These are the sales hours, and then you'll have all those to consider, and then you can take it from there.
Sounds good. I apologize, I was just down there, we're trying to wrap this up to figure out when we're gonna do some things. So we already talked about 18, right, the slope failure.
So, excuse me, well, none of us could hear what your resolution to that was. You're just gonna continue to talk about it, or did
There is no
you
resolution.
figure out
Talk
some
about what?
hours?
Which
Of the
one?
hours of operation?
They're gonna provide us with
yeah.
what they want to do, and then next year.
Now, will that
With
be
the
up for
three
a public
different
vote?
operations.
Right.
It's a
Well,
public
I'm just saying
hearing.
that they
Yes.
proposed
It's
the
not a
hours right
public
there,
vote.
Well,
correct?
that's
We
gonna-
take your
Yes.
opinions
You're gonna take
and
out-
factor that into our vote.
All right, that's good.
So we'll revisit the, you know, these kind of things. That's kind of something, well, I guess with the hours of operation, we'll kick that'll be towards the end, so we will take up some of these things later on, which are like the more important things to the neighborhoods, right? But then when we close the public hearing, it's pretty much over. It's up to the board to deliberate and
Exactly.
actually make final decisions,
Well,
so
we're allowed to speak on our own behalf.
while the
At the
public,
hearing.
while,
At the hearing.
while
yeah.
these public hearings are taking place,
Right.
absolutely. I'll always give Geosyntec, the peer review engineers, give their findings on the application. PJ Keating will always have the second opportunity to either agree or disagree, like we've kind of done tonight.
Right.
And then from there, I'll go to the community, the public, and ask for any kind of questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. And then once we get through it, it's done. When we're hashing things out, deliberating. Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
So we're trying to what we're trying to do is figure out dates. Yeah, but that's Thursday.
Thirsty now.
So what's wrong with the what?
19th, I'm out of town. 25. Gotta be the best one.
20, what happened to Wednesdays, like 20 and 27th, didn't it work for your end of the table?
For Jeff.
Okay, that's fine, so you know what, there's a consensus on the board, in the panel, that's the 25th.
We'll do 6 o'clock.
Mr. Bonnet and Mr. Kyle.
Of this one? September or October?
September 25th.
Okay, thank you.
If I did October 25th, would you be strangling me right now? Don't answer that.
Stranger things have happened.
So anyways, are you gentlemen available and do we feel comfortable that we'll like be
Monday,
ready to,
the 20th.
Monday, the 25th.
yeah.
Gentlemen?
So it gives us like almost 3 weeks to, so we can get ourselves, and you guys always like time to look at whatever we're gonna be, peer review's gonna be digested.
It sure
so-
makes it more productive, I think. Yeah.
So we're trying to be considerate and get to you at least 5 days in advance, 7 days maybe, but hopefully we'll have a,
We committed to 2 weeks for when we talked earlier, so.
so you're good, everybody's good for the 25th?
Mr. Chairman, I move to continue the public hearing to September 25th, which is a Monday, at 6 PM, right here at the Council on Aging.
Well,
So fast.
oh,
So I can do my notes.
That's the motion.
Yeah, second.
all those in favor?
Roll call for it. Aye.
No.
All right.
Alright. September 25th, 6 PM.
Thank you very much.
Come with a smiley face.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Motion, is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.